So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination. Right? We suffer twice. What you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
You talked about the fear of fear and how you had to learn to let go of your fear of fear. What does that actually mean, letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah. So I talk about how we fear the wrong things.
What do we fear?
So most of us are fearful of how our friends are reacting, what's happening on social media, and what's the random bit of news that we heard. None of it is fact-based. That's one of the biggest issues that we have.
It's worry-based.
It's worry-based, and it's also imagination-based. So we become fiction writers. We've all watched too many movies. Now we start writing these beautiful movies in our head. Well, not beautiful, scary movies in our head of what may happen. So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination. Right? We suffer twice. And this is the
what
biggest...
actually happens to us,
Totally.
and then the story we continue to tell ourselves.
Totally. Now there's this incredible study in the book that I have to talk about. So they took monks and they took non-monks and they
competed against each other.
They competed against each other, literally. So they put this plate where you experience heat. And so what happens is the non-monks touch this plate. Now this plate heats up gradually, softly, and then at one point it gets really hot for 10 seconds and it cools down. And so what happened is that when the non-monks touched it, the anxiety and pressure and stress in their brain just triggered straight away, even though it wasn't that hot.
It wasn't hot.
It was heating, but it wasn't hot to do anything major to you. But the anxiety and stress in imagination or in anticipation went through the roof in the non-monks. Now this is what's fascinating. When the monks touched it, they showed that it didn't feel anything as it rose, but as it got to its highest, they felt physical pain, but they showed no trigger of emotional pain because they did not assign any emotional element to that pain. So my point with that is, you can look at the news right now and you can get scared straight away and get in complete freeze mode, feeling stuck, paralyzed, whatever it is, because what you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
And you can cause sickness in yourself.
You can cause sickness
just by the
inside
story,
yourself.
not actually...
The reality.
The facts of the disease hitting you or something happening physically to you.
Totally. And that story, again, can be used positively. So your story may actually be true. But if it's going to be true, now you can prepare. And that shifts you away from being scared because now you're preparing.
Yes.
And so the real
You can be confident because you prepared.
Exactly. And so we should be shifting our fear energy into preparation energy. Because what fear does is it keeps you locked there, right? We just feel stuck. I'll give you an example. Like when you were preparing for big games, when you used to play in the NFL, right? And you're playing American football against some of the biggest athletes in the world, it's like you can either sit there and be scared that you're going to play this game on the weekend, or you can prepare. And your confidence is in the preparation. So when people go, how do I feel confident right now? Are you preparing?
Are you putting the reps?
Are you putting the reps?
Yeah.
Are you building your immunity? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you
drinking lots of water?
Are you drinking lots of water? Are you taking the steps that are needed to prepare for whatever's coming? You will feel more confident that way.
Yeah. So how do we learn to let go of the fear of fear, though? Like, how do we say, okay, we're only going to allow it to hurt us when it actually hurts us and not the fear of it? Is there a process? Is there just an awareness of this, that when you're in anxiety, worry, stress, fear, you just breathe and meditate? Then what's the process of letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah, so meditation, mindfulness, powerful tools, but I'd say the process, and I want to be as tactical and strategic as we can. The thing is to get really close to that fear. So what we usually do is embrace it, get close to it, get intimate with it. We
become the bat. Sit in the bat cave.
Literally, yeah.
And embrace the fear.
Totally.
Yeah.
We run away from fear. We like to run away and go, oh, it's not coming with me. Or what we do is we hear one thing and we define the whole understanding of our fear based on that one thing.
Yes.
So it's like someone, and I'll give you a normal example in a normal life scenario.
Yes.
Someone says to you in the office, you know that they're going to cut a few people. And you don't even check. You don't even know.
Is it real?
And now you just made it real, and now you're running with it, and you're trying to run away from it. So you're trying to avoid conversations with your boss. You're trying to avoid any conflict. You're trying to, you're just trying to avoid it. And so actually what you need to do is go, okay, let me actually discover that fear. Let me go intimate with that fear. Let me ask myself, where's that fear coming from? What am I really scared of? What am I really scared of? Am I really scared of losing my job? Am I scared of not having any money? What am I really scared of? And when you get to the root, and I call it the why ladder in the book. So it's asking yourself, what am I scared of? And then go, why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? And when you can't ask why any longer, you've got to the answer, and that's what you have to deal with. Most of us are not dealing with what we're actually scared of. So that's how you let go. You let go by keep asking yourself. So I'll give you an example of mine. Like if I heard that, or if you hear that in your office that people are getting cut, it's like you just get scared and panicked. But the question is, why am I scared of that? Am I scared of that because I haven't been working hard for 6 months? Am I scared of that because I've been skipping meetings? Am I scared of that because I know my boss will probably fire me first? Or am I scared because I've been performing really well and I'm expecting a promotion? Knowing which one it is sets you up to build the path forward. Not knowing that just puts you in this panic frenzy.
I think also like doing all the things you talked about, which is discovering within yourself, being aware of it, but then also just have the conversation.
100%.
Like confront it with your manager, your boss, and say, hey, listen, I heard some rumors that there might be some cuts, and I want to let you know that I'm 100% committed to doing whatever it takes to help this company grow.
Yes, 100%.
I believe in this mission more than anything. Here's what I've been doing the last 3 months, and here's what I want to continue to do. Is there anything else I can do?
Totally.
Like show them to like why you shouldn't get cut.
Exactly, and that's, you know how to approach that discussion when you know which side you're on, what your fear is.
I remember as a freshman playing football, I was playing Division II football in Minnesota. They usually redshirt all the freshmen. And I went into this with a big ego, thinking like, I'm gonna start, or at least I wanna play, right? So I went into it with an ego in the first place. But I also, which wasn't good, but I also went into it with some things that were good from this conversation. I told the coach straight up, like, I know you don't play freshmen, but my intention is to play. What is it gonna take for me in order to get on the field? You know, do I need to get here early? Do I need to stay late? Can I sit here in the office with you after the before practice and go over game film? Whatever it was, and he told me, yeah, I need you to come in the office every single day and watch game film with me. I need to be with your receiver coach every single day beforehand and doing reps. And I just did it. And I eventually started to play my freshman year. I didn't start in the beginning, but I started to start at the end. And that for me was powerful. It's like I dressed in it because I wanted to play and I was afraid I wasn't going to play at all. And just waste a year of practicing like every other freshman would do there. That was my ego going in, like amazing. I need to play. But I was also like, I'll do whatever it takes and I'll practice and I'll confront it with conversation and say, this is my intention, this is my vision, and I'm going to do whatever it takes for you. And so I think that
that's a perfect example.
Yeah, if you're in a workplace, you've got to be confronting it and be proactive in your conversation.
Correct, and that's a perfect example of getting close to fear rather than running away from it.
Exactly.
Spot on, man.
For me, my whole mission in the last year and moving forward, the next projects I'm working on are all about belief in yourself. I believe self-doubt is the killer of dreams. And I believe that, and you have this amazing graph in here, it's about ego versus self-esteem. How do we build self-belief, self-esteem, self-confidence while also not allowing our ego to be so big and think we can just do anything? How do we balance ego and self-confidence so they don't hurt each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we experience most of the time is extremes.
Yes.
So the two extremes that most of us experience are either I have to think I'm the best, I'm the best in the world, I can crush anyone, like I'm like gonna show everyone what I'm like, or most of us experience the other extreme, which is I'm the worst. I'm the stupidest, I'm the dumbest, I'm the most worthless, I'm the biggest loser. Notice how that's both ego.
Really?
Yes.
Why is the negative
so
ego?
The ego wants to be the best of the best, or the ego wants to be the worst of the worst. The ego won't accept being in the middle.
Really?
The ego wants to feel the deepest sense of being the lowest. And that's why victim mentality is actually a subsequence of ego.
Really?
Yeah, that's how it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita, because the point is that you can't deal with just being bad. You have to be the worst.
My pain is the worst. I think Jada talked about this on your podcast where she was like, you know, I had to tell people why my hurt was more painful than their hurt and they could never understand how bad it was. Right?
Exactly. That's
ego as well.
That's ego as well. So you see these two sides of ego keeping us locked away. And so the only way to get with that and the only way to balance it and bring it all into one is genuine self-honesty. Honesty is the best place to be. And the best thing about honesty is I'm really good at this, I'm really average at that, and I'm really bad at that. And the challenge we have with that is most of us have no idea. We just have zero self-awareness about what we are good at, what we are bad at, and what we're average at. So we think, I'm pretty average at everything. I'm pretty good at everything. And when I hear those answers, I'm like, simple things. Just go and talk to people that know you.
Yeah, what am I great at?
Ask them, what's my superpower?
Yeah.
What do I do differently? What do you think I do that is different that no one else does? And guess what? I guarantee you, if you ask a colleague, if you ask a friend, if you ask a family member, if you ask a people
they'll say
from,
different things
they'll
too.
say different things. But you get to learn about yourself. So real confidence comes from knowing your strengths and going all in on them. Your confidence does not come from just standing up the right way or just saying the right stuff to yourself.
Body language only.
Yeah, and that's important. I'm a big believer in all of that, but what I'm saying is that doesn't build real confidence. Yeah. Real confidence comes from thinking, I'm really good at this, I know I can do this, and I love doing it. And really, this is the most important bit. Confidence comes from serving other people. When you see the impact you have on others, and this is the biggest issue, the reason why we have such low self-esteem today in the world is because people are not serving others. So they don't see the profound impact they have on others. When you put out a video or a podcast and people tag you on Instagram and they say, Lewis, you stopped me from depression, or you helped me out of a divorce. Yeah. Or people, when they watch my content, they'll be like, that stopped me from committing suicide, or whatever it is. When you see that, you get such a deep sense of self-worth that you matter. And guess what? Everyone matters. Whether you matter to 1 people or 1 million people, everyone matters. Yeah. But if you see your impact on someone's life, you will feel such a deep sense of self-worth. And so whether you're serving at giving out free food, or whether you're serving at a local charity place, or whether you're serving through your work, serve, because when you take that step, you get a boost of self-esteem.
But why do so many of us live in fear and desire mode as opposed to duty and love mode? Why is that? Like, why are we still focused on self as opposed to service?
It's conditioned, right? I've said this before, that we're wired for generosity, but we're educated for greed. I think I just said it to you 2 years ago when I was on the podcast. Yes. And it's like, and when I said that in the statement,
so
it was, and it's so true. We're wired for generosity, but we're educated for greed, because what happens is, when we're kids, you'll see kids serve, go out their way, they want to share.
It's part of my candy bar, whatever,
totally,
right?
Yeah. And then as we get older, we're told that there's less. And this is what the key is. As we get older, we're told there are finite numbers of how many kids get made onto the basketball or baseball team.
Yes.
We're told there's a finite number of college spaces. We're told there's a finite number of how many tickets there are. We're told there's a finite number of people that are successful. Guess what? In the theater of happiness, there are infinite and unlimited seats. And there is a seat with your name on it.
That's so good.
There is a seat with your name on it in the theater of dreams, in the theater of happiness. But you think that because you think that there are only 100 people allowed in, that if someone else makes it before you, that you don't get in. And guess what? Is there a cap on how many billionaires there are in the world?
No.
No. Is there a cap on how many millionaires there are in the world?
No.
No. Is there a cap on how many happy people there are in the world? No. And that's why I really am encouraging Forbes. I want Forbes, forget printing a rich list, print a happy list, print a service list, print a list of who is serving.
We should do that. We should do that.
Who is serving the most in the world.
Wow.
Right?
That'll be competition based.
Yeah, sure.
I gave more than you gave.
Yeah, and that's why it should be service based on time, energy, and money. Because we should start showing how much time people give, how much energy people give. Mother Teresa, I don't think she gave any money to her charities.
Right.
But she gave a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
You know, you look at all the people who made a change in the world, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, like, they may not have given a lot of money to stuff.
Yeah,
they gave time and energy.
You don't have to give resources, but your resourcefulness, your love, your time, your focus, your attention, your compassion.
Love that.
Resourcefulness of the heart, not of the wallet, I think is
Love
key.
that.
And you don't need to have a lot of money to make a big impact.
You don't. Yeah. And this is the training. See, we've been educated for greed because we've been told everything's limited. There's limited number of this, limited number of this, number. And every time you play in numbers, and I think it was Bob Marley who said it, but every time you play in numbers, you'd always be dissatisfied because guess what?
Someone's always have more.
Someone's always gonna have more. I was speaking to a friend recently, and this friend was telling me that he bought a home, which is very expensive.
Yes.
Very, very expensive. And he went to a party at someone else's house. And he told me that when he was getting a tour of this party, he found out that this person had a painting on his wall which cost the amount his house cost.
Shut up.
And so he was joking with me. He was like, that guy's
painting in the house.
He's got my house on his wall.
Wow.
And that just puts things into perspective. And you think about that, like, and then you look at someone like Jeff Bezos and you think, oh, well, he's the richest man in the world, but does he have the most fame? No, he doesn't.
Right.
Does he have the most beauty? Subjective decision. Does he have the most strength or power? Maybe not. And so no one has the most of everything. So when you measure yourself by numbers, you'll always be second, third, fourth, fifth in something.
And I think by measuring yourself by needing to have the most of anything is probably a recipe for unhappiness. Of like, well, okay, I'm not gonna have the most of anything, but I'm gonna have the most money. You're still gonna be unhappy.
Totally.
Even if you have the most of something, doesn't mean you're gonna be happy.
Totally. I think it was Albert Einstein who said it best, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And I love that because it removes this belief that things are finite and limited, and they're not. If you want to be happy and successful, if no matter that there are 700,000 podcasts, if that is your dharma, if that's your calling, if that's your purpose, like, you can do that. There's no cap on how many successful soccer players that can exist at the same time.
Or how many books are out in the world.
There's no cap. There's no one stopping you, and that's the mindset that we're educated.
So can you share what that means to hear in between the lines through prayer, meditation, mindfulness, and kind of what this all means? How can we understand this? There's a lot of noise about it, but what does it really mean?
Yeah. Beautiful. First of all, I'm glad to be back, man. The School of Greatness is
excited, man.
A special place. And the fact that so everyone who's listening or watching, this is how you test whether your friend really knows you. Lewis just told my life story in 30 seconds, which means that we're real friends. Lewis was able to summarize everything that I've been through in the last 10 years in 30 seconds. So I appreciate you, man.
Of course, man.
And I'm really happy to be back. And yeah, I think, let's talk about the term and let's talk about that specific answer. So when I hear the word mindfulness, to me, what it really means is intentionality. What I mean by that is, are you crafting, designing, and intentionally creating your life? Or are you just coasting in the passenger seat of your life, which is just dragging you and driving you wherever it's taking you? And so it's the difference between being the driver or being in the passenger seat. And so to me, living intentionally is what allows you to live a life of by design. And so I'll give you an example of what mindfulness can look like. There's something in the book that I talk about called the 3 S's, which are sights, sense, and sounds. Now, if you think about that, we're exposed to sights, sense, and sounds every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. But how many of us have crafted those to be sights, sense, and sounds that we want in our life? So this is what I realized. When we were monks, one of the most important things was, what was the first thing you saw, the sight, when you woke up?
And right now, most people are probably seeing their screen.
Yeah, I think 80% of people look at their screens first thing in the morning and the last thing at the night. So you're seeing your screen first thing in the morning. But what are you really seeing? You're seeing everyone else's priorities. You're seeing everyone else's issues and challenges. You're seeing everyone else's messages to you, which means you're already starting your day off reactively. But what if you started your morning looking at a painting that inspired you, or a picture of a loved one that brought joy in your heart, or your favorite quote by Lewis or by anyone else that when you read that in the morning, you were like, oh yeah, I feel in charge today to make a difference in the world. So imagine the first thing you saw in the morning was something inspiring. How much would your day change? That's mindfulness. Mindfulness is being intentional and mindful about what you are exposing yourself to. Let's talk about sounds next. So sounds was something that I started to study actually much later from a modern life perspective. But when we were monks, we would wake up to birds, we would wake up to water, we'd wake up to gongs or cymbals. Chants, exactly, which are all beautiful sounds. Now, the crazy thing is all of us wake up to something called an alarm. Now,
right, just like...
Literally, I don't know why anyone would want to wake up
Alarmed.
to an alarm. Why would you want to wake up alarmed? It means now your system is alarming. Like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to wake up in shock, in a state of like a jolt? I don't think that's a positive way to wake up. So changing the sound that you wake up to. Now, I'm not saying that everyone can wake up to nature sounds. Maybe you're one of those people who just hit the snooze button again. But what if you woke up to a sound or a song that brought you joy? Now, when I lived in New York for 2 years, between 2016 and 2018, I started to feel quite exhausted by the end of the day. And I was really looking into like, why is it that I feel tired? And I started to realize I came across this term called cognitive load. And what it means is that a lot of the sounds that you hear in New York City are sounds that are insignificant for your mind to process. Drilling, construction work, taxis honking, driving, cars screeching, scratching.
People yelling at each other in the streets.
People yelling at each other on the streets. Like, all of that sound is called cognitive load, where your brain is now trying to make sense of meaningless sound.
Or it's also just like, should I be afraid? This is a loud sound. Is my brain going to fight or flight? Like, I need to protect myself. So you're always being alarmed.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear sirens.
I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Show me your morning routine and I'll show you your future. That's right. I believe the way you start your day has a direct impact on the success of your business, your finances, your relationships, and of course, your wellness and mental health. So today, I'm inviting you to join me in my latest upcoming free webinar, The 5 Secrets to the Ultimate Morning Routine. If you want to stop getting tripped up with procrastination, holding on to old fears and self-doubt, and start multiplying your income and impact, then this one is for you. It is possible to break out of the routines that aren't serving you and live more peaceful and purposeful days in the future. But first, you need to commit to taking action and showing up to the webinar. So join me, join Team Greatness in our amazing community, and click the link to sign up right now.
Now, when you hear sirens, sirens have an emotional trigger and they have an emotional response to them. So think about your day. Think about when you come home from work. Well, now you're working from home.
Right.
What sound do you want to hear when you're working? What sound do you want to hear at the end of the day? When you sound design your life, that's called mindfulness. That's being intentional. Yes. And then finally, scent. Scent is such a powerful sense that we're not even aware. How many of you, when you smell your favorite food, can't already wait to eat it? Like, you can almost taste it.
Salivating.
You're salivating. You can taste it already just through scent. Why is it that every time you walk into... my favorite, I think pizza has one of the best scents.
Well, your wife Rowdy's got some amazing food. That was amazing scent. When I walked in the kitchen last week, I was like, this is amazing.
That was for you. That was special. That was for you. That was for you. That was a good meal. That was a really good meal. She really appreciated that you love to eat too. Like, she was happy. Her heart was full.
Exactly. Bring a former jock into your house and you'll clear all the food out.
She was like, I've never seen someone eat that much. And I was like, he's this like big American dude. I was like, Lewis is like, he can eat. And so, no, it was great. She was so happy that you appreciated it so much. She really appreciated that.
But the scent is important in your life.
When you walk into a massage spa, it's the scent, the eucalyptus, the lavender, the sandalwood. It
puts you in a peaceful state.
Dude, scent puts you in zen without trying. And so mindfulness is intentionally creating a life that makes you feel what you want to feel without having to just create the feeling from inside. You may say, Jay, I really struggle trying to be positive. I struggle trying to deal with anxiety. I struggle trying to be focused. Your sight, sense, and sounds can help you do that. Yeah. And you start creating an environment where you naturally feel that. Like today when I walked into your studio, I saw your books, I saw all these motivational quotes, I saw a boxing glove, and it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in a uplifting environment, right? So you already get triggered.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a friend of mine mentioned one time on the podcast, Chris Lee, said you want to create an environment like a rainforest where things can thrive and grow, as opposed to having an environment like a desert where things go to die.
That's beautiful.
And if you have sights, sense, and sounds that are like a desert for your life or your heart, then it's going to be hard to grow those things from your heart. But if you create an environment of a rainforest where things can grow, water, nature, cool air, things like that, then you can really start to cultivate that growth. Yeah. You mentioned about creating and designing your life. How much of the world do you think we receive by being here? And how much of the world do we create ourselves?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's a complete dynamic dance between what the Vedic tradition would call fate and free will. So fate is what is already created for you, and a good example would be the place you were born, the type of family you grew up in, the socioeconomic background you had. It was already there when you walked into the world. But within that, you had choices where your free will came about. You had the choice to either do what everyone in your neighborhood did or to do something different. You had the choice to have a relationship with a particular person or not. So what happens is that we're constantly creating new spaces from which we have another choice.
Right.
And so you kind of see it as this dynamic dance between, okay, now I'm in this situation, and now what is my choice in this situation? So I would say, I'm not saying it's equal, I'm saying it's a dynamic balance and a switching process where you're constantly creating a new level, and then now in that level you have a next choice.
Because we didn't have the choice to be created here. We were here, and that wasn't our choice. Now everything after that is our choice, right?
Yeah, and there are some traditions, and I'm a big diver into like reincarnation and past lives. So according to the beliefs of reincarnation or past lives, you have at some point made a choice to be here. But taking it more simplistically, the truth is that when you're brought into a situation, it's the best analogy that I've heard, and it's been told for years, is of a father is an alcoholic. One of the sons that he has decides to become an alcoholic because his father's an alcoholic. The other son decides to never drink alcohol because his father's an alcoholic.
Right.
So they were exposed to the same situation and same scenario. Same environment. But they both made different choices based on their experience. And that's the choice element. That's the element that we should be trying to empower in our lives, because we can constantly say, I'm limited by my environment, or I've been restricted by my environment. And hey, it's true. There are so many of us that have been limited and restricted. But by now you repeating that, you are going to repeat that restriction in your life.
How much of a positive environment supports us in our growth or holds us back? There are some people who have the perfect family situation, resources, beautiful backyards and nature, who are lazy. And there are others who have, divorced parents, abusive friends, an environment of a desert, and they figure out a way to thrive.
Totally.
How much importance does our environment play in our overall success?
If you look at the examples that you just shared and you really analyze life, you'd see very little, because you see people craft their own life. So a good example for me is that when I came back from living in the ashram, and there were other people who may have been monks who'd also left the path, and I came back to a not financially successful or supportive family. So my family doesn't have abundant wealth and couldn't necessarily have taken care of me or paid for me forever. And I had to figure out my own life. And that to me was a great sense of impetus and incentive to go and figure it out and learn new skills and network and meet people. And I saw other friends whose parents had like a property portfolio with like 10 properties ready to hand them over. They had a BMW the second that they came out, whatever, from their own life.
Yep.
Or I even have friends that had all of that and didn't become monks and didn't even find careers. So I've also got friends that I went to school with that today don't even have careers, even though their parents were really well established.
Right.
Which has, all of these examples have continued me to believe that we truly have influence in more than our environment. Our environment affects us for sure. It plants seeds and weeds into our life, but there is still a choice. And I think even if you feel there isn't a choice, simply by accepting that there is, it means you have a chance to get out of there. And I think that's what...
Because if you don't accept that there is, then you're just going to stay stuck.
Correct. Like, there have been so many times in my life, and there's a beautiful quote from Edison. I don't think I said this last time, but if I did, it's worth repeating. He said that when you believe you've exhausted all options, remember this, you haven't. And the reason why I love that is your mind continuously feels stuck when it's tried the obvious. And that's why a lot of creativity and focus studies say that the first 10 ideas that come to your mind are never the most interesting. It's when you get into the 11th idea that you start breaking the pattern. And so if someone asks you, what's your best business idea? Your first 10 ideas are probably not that innovative. And so the mind constantly gets stuck on that train. And you've got to keep reminding yourself that there is another door. There could be another pathway. I was thinking about a piece of advice so one of my closest spiritual mentors, who was in London, I knew him since I was probably like 12 and properly went since I was 18. He passed away this year from stage 4 brain cancer. And he'd had brain cancer for about, I think like 4 years now. And so I hadn't really had a real interaction with him for the past few years, because every time I saw him, he wasn't fully functioning in his short-term memory. His long-term memory was there, but his short-term memory wasn't. And I remember speaking to him probably about 7, 8 years ago and asking him the question. I said to him, you know, I've got so many ideas. There's so many things I could do. Where do I start? And he said this beautiful thing to me. He said, you know what? Your role should be to open up every door possible. And he said, let the world close the doors you're not meant to walk through and walk through the ones that remain open.
Ooh.
And what I realized is most of us are just not opening up enough doors because we think we only have the option of 2 doors. We look at life as binary, 0 and 1, 0 and 1, right? It's just
this or
A
that,
or B, this or that. And I mean, I think you'd say this too about you and every guest you ever had on. I don't think life is ever this or that. It's like this, that, and maybe that, and that. And there's always a gap.
Of course. The challenge that people have that I've sensed a lot is the fear of criticism when you go after something that you weren't supposed to do or that people don't think you're supposed to do. Why do so many people fear criticism from peers, family, friends, the media? Why is that such a big fear? And how do we overcome criticism from others?
Psychologically, we feel a sense of safety and security when we think people agree with us. Right? That is just psychologically true, that we would rather avoid conflict and sit in a space where we agree, and therefore we have something called confirmation bias and the echo chamber, where we keep surrounding ourselves with thoughts and ideas that are similar and reaffirm our beliefs. Now, I think that you can have that and at the same time entertain ideas that you're not sure about yet. And so one of my favorite examples was MIT did this study where they asked people which person was more creative and innovative. And they showed 2 charts. One chart was employee A and the other chart was employee B. The chart for employee A, all of the people they knew each other and knew them back. So it was almost like a closed loop. And employee B, they knew lots of people who didn't know each other. And they found that people who have more people in their network who don't know each other are more likely to be creative and productive.
Really? Why is that?
Because they expose you to opposing ideas and they may counteract how you think. So one of my favorite examples of this is a conversation between Mark Zuckerberg and one of his mentors. So Mark Zuckerberg told this story at the Facebook headquarters a few years back. I wasn't there, I've seen it on video and I'm sure it's available. And he talks about how when he was struggling with the direction of Facebook in 2009, he approached his mentor. And his mentor happened to be Steve Jobs.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Wow.
Pretty cool. I wish.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. And so anyway, so Mark Zuckerberg goes to Steve Jobs and he says, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. Remember at that time, Facebook was 5 years old.
There was no fan pages, I don't think.
I don't think there was no creators. I don't think there were fan pages. It was very much used by university students at that stage. Like I think it was mainly like Ivy Leagues
college
and
kids.
College kids. And I don't even think it was international in a massive way. Very early days, and now we can't even think of that. But 2009, I mean, you know, you just about had the iPhone and just about had Instagram and YouTube. Man. So he went up to Steve Jobs and he said, you know, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. What do I do? Now, Steve Jobs at that time obviously was already the founder of one of the biggest brands on the planet, and obviously the brand still is. He had access to investors. He had access to business coaches. I'm sure he had access to life coaches. He had access to
health experts. Everything.
He had access to anything. Like I don't think there's anyone, scientists, PhDs. I don't think there's anyone in the world who Steve Jobs couldn't have called up at the time. And Steve Jobs said something amazing. He said, "You know what, Mark? I think you should go and live in an ashram in India."
He did not.
He did.
No way.
It's a true story. He goes, and when you go to live in the ashram in India, that's where, if you spend some time there, that's where you'll find your answer.
Shut up.
And Mark did it.
No
Mark
way.
Went to the ashram. It's a true story.
For how long?
I believe he was there for, I've seen 2 online. I've seen 2 versions of the exact time he was there. I've seen some people said it was a couple of days or a week, or some people said it's a month. So I think it's hazy how much time he actually spent there. But he went. And he says that based on that experience, that's where he found the direction of Facebook, to be connecting people. Now, the reason why I love that story is because it's the unobvious, alternative, random connection. And when Harvard did a study of 3,000 executives, they looked at and asked them, what's the number 1 skill for being a good leader? And a lot of people would say communication. A lot of people would say vision, strategy, humility. And the number 1 answer that they got from 3,000 executives was the one word which is called associating. And what that means is the ability to spot patterns where everyone else doesn't see them. And that's the connect, that real leaders can spot patterns and connections in anomalies. So most people will be like, what has an ashram got to do with a tech platform?
Right.
But that is where you expand your mind to find answers that you never expected.
How important is creating alone time with noises, people, busy work to allow your mind to expand? Is that the only time in that silence? I think you mentioned it. Silence to hear in between the lines.
Yeah.
Is that where we start to hear what we're supposed to be creating, where we're supposed to be heading, our mission? I'm really glad you brought that back. I wanted to get back to that. So when we talk about, there's a beautiful statement by David Lynch, who's a movie producer and a deep meditator. And he says that prayer is how you talk to God and meditation is how God talks to you. Ooh.
And whether you believe in God or the universe or spirit or divine, whatever it means, the point is that there is a dialogue and a conversation.
So prayer is like you're speaking, you're saying, here's what I want.
Here's how I feel.
Help me,
yeah.
And meditation is more receiving.
Receiving, yeah. And so I love that statement because I think it makes it very clear that we have to have a dialogue with the universe. We have to have a dialogue with people in our lives. We have to have a dialogue, and there's both giving and receiving. So when I talk about hearing in between the lines, the best example I can give you, Lewis, is let's take a look at you and your relationship and mine and my wife's relationship. One of us is always traveling.
Yeah.
So you travel, your partner travels, I travel, my wife travels. Sometimes we're missing each other. Imagine you've got really busy and hectic. Do you think, and anyone listening or watching, you can ask the same question. If you were really busy and hectic and stressed out, do you think your partner feels comfortable to tell you how they feel and get your attention?
If I'm busy, stressed out, overwhelmed, will my partner tell me how I feel about themselves or about...
Yeah, do you think they would feel confident to be like, Lewis, I need to tell you something really important?
I don't think they would.
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They really wouldn't, because...
They don't want to stress you out more.
They don't want to stress you out more.
You're not present, all these things.
Exactly. So, exactly that. And so what happens is, when you're still, your mind and body actually get to speak to you and give you signals of how they feel. And so when you're still, that's when you notice that ache in your foot that you haven't noticed for a month. Sometimes when you slow down, that's when you get sick, because your body wasn't allowing itself to be sick because you were pushing it to get through stuff. And so just like your partners can't communicate with you until you slow down, your body and mind can't communicate with you until you still. And so there's a beautiful Buddhist teaching that says what movement does for the body, stillness does for the mind. And so when we find that space, stillness, and solitude, you really are able to hear your deepest desires and challenges, your physical pains and areas of growth. It's one of the reasons why when people meditate, they feel sleepy afterwards and they think they're doing it wrong, but actually they're doing it right. Meditation just told you needed more sleep.
You needed to rest.
Yeah, meditation was just a signal. So sometimes when I meditate with people that I'm coaching,
they're like, pass out.
Yeah, some of them will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, Jay, I'm just feeling so tired. And I'm like, no.
Then sleep, then rest.
Yeah, that's what your body's telling you, because you finally listened. And some people are like, oh, Jay, I feel so energized. And I'm like, yeah, because you allowed yourself to be in line with your body, and now your body's saying that you feel energized. And that's great. You've got that energy. Go work out, go build something. So,
or you've cleared out those negative thoughts, or you've let go of those distractions, or that resentment, and so you're not feeling this weight, so you feel lighter.
Correct. And so that stillness and silence is one of my favorite ways for you to actually build that relationship with hearing your inner voice.
Is there too much silence? Like if you say, okay, 5 hours a day, is there a tipping point when you're like, okay, I think you do 2 hours every morning, but a lot of people say, well, I've only got 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Is 5 hours too much? Is an hour, what is the maximum or minimum or the sweet spot you think for people to be silent every day to live a great life?
I think 20 minutes is a great starting point.
Yeah.
Because 20 minutes is significant enough time for your mind to switch off. So we hear that studies showed that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day.
And a lot of them are repeating.
80% are negative, and I'm guessing a lot of them are repeated.
Yeah.
And so if you're only going to say, I'm going to do 5 minutes, it just takes 5 minutes to switch off. Like it takes 5 minutes to just overcome that noise. And so I'd say that 20 minutes is a good amount of time. And hey, you're not trying, and I think this is the challenge with meditation mindfulness, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just trying to be present with it and actually listen to it and experience it.
Why did you decide that you wanted to be a monk in the first place, and how old were you when you did that?
Absolutely. So the story starts with something I've been saying a lot called you can't be what you can't see. So I didn't grow up wanting to be a monk.
Like, what did you grow up wanting to be?
Yeah, I grew up wanting to be a mix of an art director, like for a big magazine or online company, because I loved design, I loved graphics, I loved video and art when I was growing up. I loved philosophy and I loved economics. Those were like my three favorite subjects: art, design, philosophy, and economics. And I always thought I'd be something boring like an investment banker, because I often say when you grow up in a Asian or Indian family, and if you have any Asian or Indian followers, they'll agree, I had three options. I could either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure, right? Those were like my three options. And so that's what I was going to be. I couldn't be any of those, so I was going to be an investment banker or a strategy consultant, because I was like, I'm rubbish at medicine, I'm not very good at law. So I was kind of going down that route, because you can't be what you can't see. And growing up as a young Asian person in London, you don't see many people in the media, you don't see many Asians in sport, you don't see many Asians in anything apart from accountancy, business, medicine, and law. That's literally what you see. And then I was 18. I'm at university. I'm studying my undergraduate, which is in behavioral science.
In London?
In London. So I've always been fascinated by why people do what they do. Always fascinated by why we make decisions, why we lie, why people cheat, why people pretend to be someone they're not. Like, all those questions always fascinated me, but just from an intellectual point of view, rather than helping people unpackage it. So I was studying that. And then at my university, we'd have some of the best entrepreneurs coming to speak every week.
In London, right?
In London.
Yeah.
At Cass Business School. So there's people coming in every single week. And then I found out that the week later, after I've been watching entrepreneur after entrepreneur, loved hearing from CEOs, their success stories. I was a huge fan of rags to riches stories. Like, not the riches because of wealth, but just that whole thing of like people going from nothing to something. Like, that fascinated me. So I used to read autobiographies. I thought I hated reading until I was 14, until someone handed me an autobiography. I think I remembered reading The Rock's autobiography back then too, because I used to watch wrestling. But anyway, so I'm fascinated by people who go from nothing to something. And then a monk's invited to speak at my university, and I actually get forced along. I'm actually not that interested. I'm like, what's a monk gonna teach me? Who cares? Like, I've never seen a monk in my life, don't really know what they do. Get forced by one of my mates to come along. I basically have nothing better to do that night. I turn up. I'm hearing this monk speak, and he captivated me like the most beautiful woman in the world, right? I was just completely enthralled and addicted to everything he said. I was hanging off every word, and there was a voice in my head that was just like, who is this guy? And then I find out that he'd given up jobs at Google and Microsoft to become a monk. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, who does that? Everyone that I've ever met, that's all they've been chasing. And all the stories that I'd followed in life were people who went from nothing to something. And here was a guy who had something, but had traded it to have nothing, but looked like the happiest person I'd ever met. So it was like the most paradoxical moment of my life, like the most ironic thing that could have happened. Anyway, so I go and speak to him afterwards. I loved networking with speakers. I'd always approach people after their speech if I was moved. I went up to him and I just said, you know what, everything you said just resonated with me. And there was one thing that he said that stood above everything, and he spoke about this principle about plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. All right? Plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. What he meant was selfless service, giving without expecting, using everything you have, doing something for nothing, just being able to give. And for some reason, that 18-year-old me, hearing about selflessness, that word kind of just, I don't know what it was. It was just one of those moments that just, it penetrated through every desire I had. And service and selflessness became like my biggest aspiration in like a moment. And I started talking to him. So I started interning with him in India as a monk every summer holidays.
Really?
So I'd finish
you're
my
a freshman this year when you.
I was basically 18. I guess so.
19,
Yeah, I guess that's what you call it when you just started out.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So after the first year, you had a summer break.
Correct.
You go to India to be with him for a month, 2 months.
Yeah, a month or 2 months. However, so I'd get a summer holiday. I'd spend half of it working at a big corporate firm because I thought that's what I was going to do, and I'd spend the rest of it and Christmas holidays that we get in London, I'd spend it in India, just kind of shadowing him. And I describe it like that. I was literally interning to be a monk, where you live like a monk, you practice monk principles, you follow what they do on a daily basis, and you get to experience what it's like. And I'd work at I'd work at some of these biggest companies in the world, and then I'd go to living as a monk, like polar opposites. We'd be out at night drinking, networking after this work gig, right? The stuff you do, bars, clubs, etc. And then like for the rest of the months, I'm like meditating and spending time with these enlightened beings. And I can honestly say, having tested and experimented both, I fell in love with that lifestyle more. So having everything on that side versus having nothing on that side, I fell in love with having nothing. And so it was like a perfect A and B test. You know, it was like the perfect process. So
everything and nothing, which,
Yeah, so I always say you can't be what you can't see. I wouldn't have become a monk if I didn't see a monk. That's my journey to why it started. Why did I decide to become a monk? Because I got to meet a monk, which exploded the horizons and possibilities of what I could be, first of all. I became a monk because I got fascinated by giving everything you have in the service of others. At a very early age, I just got fascinated by that principle. And the third thing was I fell in love with the lifestyle of a monk more than I did of a modern person.
Why did you fall in love with that?
I fell in love with it because I got so fixated on the fact that what if you could spend your whole life just helping people? Like, what if that's all you did? What if you had to learn, grow, create just to make a difference in people's lives?
Yeah.
And you didn't need anything back, and you didn't want anything back. And the only example I'd seen of that at that age was the monk. So that was the only kind of test I had, right? That's the only person I'd experienced.
You hadn't met someone who started a nonprofit or something like that who could like...
I had, but I had met people who'd done NGOs and not-for-profits, but I always found that they were still looking for funding.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I didn't necessarily fall in love with their character. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
That when I was with the monks, I felt completely in love with their character, the way they behaved,
their purity,
the way they spoke, their purity, their whole demeanor was just so attractive. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up, you know?
Wow.
So while everyone else wanted to be other stuff, when I was 18, I wanted to be a monk.
Wow.
So yeah, but I still, anyway.
How many summers did you spend with him before you said, okay?
3. So throughout the whole of university, I spent 3. So every break I spent with him.
And then after college?
Then after college, that was it. I didn't even go, so I graduated, but I didn't turn up to my graduation ceremony. So my mum's still upset that she doesn't have a picture of me holding the scroll, wearing the hat. And I left for India straight away.
Why didn't you complete it then?
I finished, as in I graduated in the sense of I had my degree.
But why didn't you go all the way, see it all the way through?
Because I remember it being delayed till December, and we finished in May, and I was just like, I'm not waiting till December, and I'm not coming back for that. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
What does it even mean? Yeah. And I left, so I literally, that's it.
I don't care, I want nothing in my life.
Yeah, and then I went.
Wow.
Yeah, so I left, and I was 22 years old, and I just left. I just wanted to be there and be with him and be with the other monks. And I saw them doing all this incredible work. It's not like they were just being monks in the way people think. I always talk about how half the day was silence and half the day is service. So the service side is building sustainable villages, building food distribution programs, teaching, helping communities. It wasn't just being, it was doing as well. So I loved that aspect of half the day to grow myself and then half the day to give.
Yeah.
And I was just like, when am I gonna have time to do this if I work a job?
Right. What's a typical day like then? What time did you wake up?
Yeah.
And you wake up on like a concrete floor with like a little yoga mat type of thing?
Literally, yeah. So we'd sleep on the floor. The floor was wood. It was like this nice wood that you have. It was decent wood. So it was wood. You have it thin yoga mats. So anyone who does yoga knows those thin yoga mats, not the posh ones. And then your sleeping bag, literally.
So you had a sleeping bag?
Yeah, you get a sleeping bag, right?
A pillow or no pillow?
Most people didn't use their pillows, but I had a nice sleeping bag. I was still that monk from London. Like everyone could tell, right? It was like his sleeping bag looks a bit too premium, but I was like, this is the least I can do.
Of course.
So I still had the premium sleeping bag. We'd wake up at about 4 a.m. every day. every single day, 4 a.m.
So the first week must have been a little rough to like get into the...
Well, you know what? The way I remember it is that I was so pumped that I talked myself into it. Plus, I'd been doing it every summer. So it wasn't new. It wasn't like I just threw myself in. I'd lived like that for 3 summers.
Yeah.
So I was kind of aware of what it was like, but I'd pumped myself so much. I'm gonna be there at 3:30. You know, I'm gonna wake up earlier than everyone. You know, I was in that, and I've always been like that. I've always been someone who wants to push. And
I want to do a workout before everyone's
literally,
up.
like I was like, I'm gonna meditate 2 hours before everyone's awake. And so I'm pushing myself to limits that I didn't know, and I wanted to test it. I was like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. So, so I was like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. So I'm just going to do this properly. You know, so I ended up, waking up at 4 a.m. From 4 till 5:15, you have collective meditation, collective prayers, collective chant, group.
Chanting.
Group chanting. Group chanting.
That must have been very like healing almost at the same time, just like chanting together. And the symphony that you create with the melodies. And
we underestimate what it feels like to be in a place where people have meditated for hundreds of thousands of years. Like places take on energies. And that place was a place where people have meditated, those 2 monasteries, people have meditated for like 40 years in that space for over 4 hours a day. So you're like walking into like the most spiritual, sacred atmosphere in the world. You only tap into that more. You know, when we go to a place, we know what it feels like when you've been on a stage that Michael Jackson performed at, or when you'd been in an arena where, you know, your favorite artist, whatever it is, the analogy that works for you. It was like walking into the arena of the monks, you know, like that the
legendary monks.
Yeah, the legend of meditate, like everything you expect a spiritual atmosphere to contain, you're getting that because it's amazing. So yeah, it was 4 to 5:15 is group meditation. Then 5:15 to 7 is private meditation. So that's your personal practice. So that's already 3 hours since you've been awake, right? 7 o'clock till 7:30 is group meditation, group chanting again. And then 7:30 to 8:30 is a wisdom class on the Vedas. So the Vedas are 5,000 years old, linguistically and philosophically the oldest books on the planet. And so you're trained in the Vedas for an hour. 7:30 to 8:30, and then
5,000-year-old book.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the oldest book, oldest dated book I've heard of. So over 5,000 years old.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It was funny actually. I was sharing this, and I share this all the time. But then I'm going to throw this in there. But when I was at Ty's house, he said this to me. He said that, and I was telling him about the Bhagavad Gita, which is 5,000 years old, and he said to me, 5,000 years, just like you did. And I was just like, yeah, 5,000 years. He goes, if it lasted 5,000 years. That must be a really good book. And it's true, if you think about it, how many
keep using it,
how many things still matter and change lives today that did 5,000 years ago? Will the Beatles be around in 5,000 years? Will Elvis, will me, will you, will any of this? But the fact that a book has withstood 5,000 years,
pretty impressive.
That's pretty impressive. Anyway, so we do that from 7:30 to 8:30. And then at 8:30 you get breakfast, right? You finally get breakfast. And from 8:30 to 9, whatever you eat breakfast. And then for the rest of the day, you'd spend the morning studying the books again on a personal level. You'd do basic things like cleaning, you'd wash your clothes, all the domestic stuff that you have to do, clean the space you live in. And then usually by lunchtime, everything changed. I'd either be out teaching local communities, or we'd be helping build these sustainable villages, food distribution programs, etc. So the rest of the day was not as planned as the morning. So when we now talk about morning routines, when I hear about that, I'm just like, yeah, that's like a monk thing. Like as a monk, you're trained to have an incredible morning routine. And then whatever you do in your day will be incredible because you've started off correctly. So it's interesting to see the rise of the morning routine as habits and success, because as a monk, that's what you're trained in.
Wow.
So yeah, that's roughly the schedule. And then it changes after 9:30 a.m.
And where in India was this?
So this is in Mumbai and 4 hours south of Mumbai.
Okay, wow.
So, but when you go outside of Mumbai, I'm looking at these beautiful plant things you have here. It's kind of like that, It's just like woodlands, like green.
Really?
Yeah, like no cars, no traffic, no noise, fresh air.
How would you guys commute then, or travel to speak or teach or build homes?
So we would have cars that we would either drive ourselves. I never drove in India. I never would drive in India. It's the scariest experience in the world. People get scared about New York. India is just a different level.
Yeah.
So I never drove, but they would have drivers, etc., who would drive us around. Monks that drive, etc.
So what's it called? The place you were at?
Ashram, or
Yeah,
a monastery.
ashram.
So a monastery is an ashram. Ashram is just a Sanskrit
Got it.
word for a monastery.
So it had like some funding so you guys could rent cars or whatever.
Yeah, so the funding comes from donors that really believe in the work you're doing, and then that money is used effectively. Again, people say, oh, how do monks drive? How do monks use money? Well, we'd never use it for ourselves. We had 2 sets of clothes. We didn't have any possessions, but we were using the cars and what we had to create these communities, to create sustainable villages, to create change in the world. So again, everything's being utilized for a higher purpose rather than the mentality of, oh, you can't use that. So if we didn't use that, we might be happy, but how are you going to help the rest of the world?
Right.
You know, so that's how we were trained.
Were you in contact with your family as well during this time, or?
Yeah, I used to connect with my family because the tradition was taught of like that, again, that balance between detachment and attachment. So it said that detachment and attachment are 2 sides of the same coin, attachment and aversion. So some people just want to be monks or want to have isolation because they want to get away from reality, which is no better than being fully attached. So the Bhagavad Gita says that attachment and aversion are 2 sides of the same coin. So actually the ideal is the central balance, where you're able to talk to your parents, you're able to give them love, you're able to be grateful, but then again, you're still realizing that there's more impact you can have in the world than just making your parents happy. So it's that perfect dynamic balance between the 2. So I'd speak to my mom and dad every month probably, catch up with them on the phone. If I was in Europe and traveling for what we were trying to do as monks, then I'd come and see them, etc., say hello to them. So I wasn't completely detached, but it was always making sure that balance. You know, not like, oh, I'm not that monk life should, the way we were trained is monk life should never be an escape from reality. It shouldn't be that you can't do anything else in life and you don't want responsibilities. That's why you become a monk, right? So it was very much ingrained in us that you're not here because you can't do anything else. You're here because you know this is higher and you can have more of an impact in your life and the world.
So, but you're not supposed to be in a relationship or have sex as a monk.
No, you're a celibate monk.
So why do you detach from that then?
Yeah, good question.
Why do you escape from that?
So that's to be able to give yourself all the time, focus and energy on personal growth and development. So we all know this, right? Anyone who's been, and I've been in multiple relationships before I became a monk. We all know this. When you're in a relationship, things slow down. Because now you're managing 2 minds, you're now having to give energy to another person, you have to give time to another person, you lose time, energy, and moments to invest in your own growth. So monks traditionally have lived celibate lives so that they can focus on their own growth, so that they're not distracted, they're not falling prey to any lust or engaging in any flirtatious conversations that again brings down the consciousness and distracts the mind. You're learning to train your mind like an athlete. Like so many athletes can't, I mean, maybe you had this experience too, but I remember reading David Beckham's autobiography many years ago, and he was talking about that, how they were trained not to have sex before big games, right? No alcohol in the weeks leading up to big games. I remember him talking about how when all his friends were out partying, he'd have to get to bed on time. So it's like you see athletes go to very similar training as monks. So it's not abnormal. We see it in modern life where people who have to be peak performance, they also use the same measures. Very similar measures to monk life.
But doesn't personal growth also come from experiencing life and not detaching from it, only isolating yourself, but also experiencing all the things that could happen in life and growing in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole thing there is that most of us just throw ourselves into the deep end and then try swim and figure it out.
Right.
Monk life actually begins at like 5 years old. Like the training of monk life is ultimately training in self-actualization and self-awareness. It's meant to start when you're 5. The problem is we all went to normal schools that try to put stuff in us rather than take stuff out of us.
It's crazy.
You talk about this.
Right.
Like, you know, you were told at school that you weren't very good and you weren't good at English, and now you have a New York Times bestseller, right? And it's like, but no one noticed that potential inside you. No one noticed that, oh, Lewis was really creative.
Right.
And you're not the only person. There's so many people who feel like that. So the modern schooling system didn't extrapolate your self-actualization, your element, and just try to put maths, English, science inside. So the point is that you're trying to get to such a strong foundation that when you interact in the world, you're going with a sense of strength, fuel, energy to make a difference, rather than going into the world and then going, oh my God, where am I, trying to figure it out. And I find what happens today is that when you don't, we all know this. Self-love's become such a big thing now. That when people don't figure out, it's like a huge trend now. But my point is that if you don't start at a place where you have self-awareness, self-actualization, you have figured out what works for you, what your strengths are, how you want to be in an environment, when you walk out there, most of us just pretend to be someone else. Most of us get lost. Most of us get carried away.
Yeah.
So my point is, strengthen yourself, grow yourself, and then of course interact with the world. So we had that. We were going out to pitch to Forbes Rich List members to fund our philanthropy work.
Wow.
Right? We'd be in these pitch meetings dressed as monks and then be laying bricks the next moment.
Oh my God.
So you get the perfect balance. At one point you're in this fancy office and the next morning you're laying bricks, you're like digging. So it's not that you're not getting both, you are getting both. Just the relationship aspect of a female partner or a male partner if you're a female monk is limited, because the whole aim is to allow you to just focus on first finding yourself before you try and find the checklist you've been following your whole life.
What would you say are the 3 questions we should ask ourselves every single day that would help us improve our life?
In that moment?
Internal questions every day during meditation. What should I be asking myself, and what should the world be asking ourselves in order to make sure we're living a purposeful life?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. Yeah, I'd say one of the first questions that always comes to my mind is how can I be of service today? How can I be and this is extended from that first question, how can I be an instrument of love, compassion, and kindness? And that's what I count as service in my own definition. And so what I would say to anyone listening is define the words yourself, because what service means to you, me, may be different to you.
Right.
And so it's important. But for me, it's like, how can I be of service today? And the reason why I love that is, we've talked about this before, when you're wired for service, you're set up, right? We talked about in the last podcast, like service sets you up to feel satisfaction, to build bonds and create connections, and does so much. So being of service is one of the first questions I would ask. The second question I would ask myself is, what do I love about myself? Right? What do I actually love about myself?
That is probably the most powerful question anyone could ask, because most people never learn to love themselves.
Totally.
And we always find the things that we don't love about ourselves, and we fixate on those things. And that's one of the repeating thoughts in our head that keeps us playing small every day.
All the time. All the time. And we talk a lot about today self-love and self-care. But I think, a lot of that starts with self-awareness, which we know about, self-knowledge. But self-knowledge creates self-trust. And a lot of it's like learning to trust ourselves. And it's like, if I don't know what I love about myself, how am I ever going to trust myself? How am I going to trust that I have my best interest at heart?
Yeah.
And so asking yourself, what do you love? And then the third and final question I think I would ask myself is who do I want to be? Right? Who is the person that I need to be, that I can love, that I want to love, that I want to give more love to? Like, what parts of growth are there still available? And there's one thing I want to add, which isn't a question, but it has been a really reaffirming or deepening affirmation for me that I keep reminding myself, and I think it's helped a lot of people that I've shared it with, is literally some days I'll just put my hand on my heart and I'll just repeat to myself, I'm exactly where I need to be. And
so true.
It's just such a great reminder. Like, if you literally put your hand on your heart and you just go, I am exactly where I need to be, you stop getting lost in the future, you stop worrying about the past, and you realize that everything you need to learn, everything you read right now to make a change, it's all right now, it's all right here. And so that's one of my favorite things to repeat. It's not a question, but
it's more of a mantra saying...
Correct, yeah.
Because I find it so hard for people today who compare themselves to everyone online about not being where they want to be, or not having the career or the relationship or the body or whatever, the following or the attention. A lot of people compare themselves to other people in their space, friends, family, and then don't feel enough. And so when we say to ourselves, I'm exactly where I need to be, does that help us eliminate the feeling of not being enough?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, because we're always feeling like we either feel like we're ahead, we feel like, I'm doing better than everyone, I'm kind of like winning the game, or more often we feel behind, where we feel like, they just got promoted, they just, they got proposed to, whatever it is. Like, we're always feeling ahead.
They had their first child or whatever.
They had their first child, they bought their first house, whatever it is, and we're always feeling ahead or behind. And so when you say to yourself, I'm exactly where I need to be, you realize you're not ahead or behind. And the problem is if you always think you're ahead or behind, then you're always comparing yourself to others. Whereas if you're where you need to be, you now just need to get to the next place of where you want to be.
Yeah.
And also you only get ahead of yourself by first being present with yourself.
And I think it's really hard to say that when you're in a challenging place in your life. I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm broke. My dog died. My girlfriend broke up with me. It's hard to accept that.
Yeah.
And I've been there. I know you've been there. It's really challenging to say, my life is perfect right now when you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
But I think when you can learn to accept timing of life and know that, a mentor of mine early on, when I was broke and I was an intern, working for free for 6 months for someone. I was living on my sister's couch. I remember saying I would do walks with him every day. And I was like, man, I could really use some money, in my life. I'm just sick of being broke. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, money comes to you when you're ready for it. And I was like, I feel pretty ready right now. I feel like I could have some money.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for it. Mentally, emotionally, my life wasn't set up. I didn't have systems set up in place to really receive the money and be able to do good with it and be able to use it for good in my life and put it to good use. And later when I started to make money, I realized I probably would have blown that money. I would have spent it poorly. I would have made the wrong investments, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear when things aren't going well, but I think trusting the timing of your life. If you would have built your empire 7 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been ready for, maybe you would have been, but you wouldn't have been ready, or social media wasn't the right timing for your message to be out there. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that if I wouldn't have gone to monk school, then I think you can become successful but still feel extremely dissatisfied or misuse the success.
Yes.
And I don't think that can be blamed on anyone because no one's ever been taught how to deal with failure or success. There's no class on here's how you deal with failure or here's how you deal with success. But the funny thing is those are the two most extreme things that we all experience.
And the things we're most afraid of are failure and success. So how do we deal with failure? If you could give a mini masterclass right now, what would you suggest to people who are afraid to fail, how to deal with it?
Yeah. I think one of my first things in failure is don't take it more personally than it actually is. And I'll give an example of that. When I was applying to 40 companies that all rejected me before an interview, all I was getting was an automated response saying your application will not go any further. I can't take that personally because they didn't meet me in person. They didn't have a interaction with me. They just saw my name. They saw I'd been a monk for 3 years. That resume is useless. I mean, what's your transferable skills? Sitting in silence and stillness. Surprise, surprise, no one wants to hire a monk. And so they rejected you. But that's not personal because they didn't meet me in person.
But what if they had meeting you in person?
Right. So that's the first step. The first step is don't take all failure. I'll give you an example. Me and you, we reach out to countless guests to be on our podcast.
Who say no all the time.
Who say no all the time. But if I don't hear a no from the guest directly, that's not a no. Someone's team can say no, someone's assistant can say no, someone's PR team can say no, but until they say no personally, it's not a no.
Okay, but when they do say no,
then that's a no. Yeah. So then let's move to that.
So how do you deal with that type of failure?
Yes. So if I deal with a failure where someone meets me in person and gets to know me.
No, Jay, you're horrible. You suck. I don't want to deal with a monk ever in my life.
Yeah.
I would never go on your show. I'm never listening to you. Never.
Yeah.
Then how do you deal with that type of
So
failure?
I've heard you say this. I've said it a couple of times, and I'm sure it's been repeated a bunch of times around how I genuinely believe failure has feedback.
It's feedback.
And so for me, it's failure has the ability to actually tell you what you need to improve. Now, not to improve to get their attention, improving to get the actions that you want to take.
Yeah, the results you want.
The results you want. And don't make that result about the person who said no. Don't try use failure as a way to prove someone else wrong.
Because what happens when we prove others wrong?
When you prove others wrong, you end up trying to get validation and approval for them. And now if they're not impressed when you're right, you lose again. So you end up losing twice.
And you spend all this time and energy, years maybe, to prove someone wrong. I've been there many times. And then you're like, I felt good for a moment. And then I feel empty again.
Totally. And so that's the thing about failure in the second half is you have to see failure as an improvement. If I'm completely honest, everyone who rejected me in my life up until now has made me more hungry, taught me so much more about myself, and made me up my game.
Yeah.
And I think if failure doesn't make you up your game, it's the same as losing in a sport. Right? When you fail and you've lost games and you've won games, you know, on the big stages.
You didn't have the skills, you didn't have the teamwork, you guys weren't hungry enough,
you
whatever
weren't
it is.
communicating enough.
There's something you were missing.
Yeah.
So you go review the game film, you check the stats, you see what could I have done better, and you try to improve that for the next game.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can do that in life, but we're so afraid to like go on the next game of life. Like I got rejected once and it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
How do people learn to overcome that pain of rejection?
Yeah.
To keep going.
Yeah.
You know, in sports, luckily there's a season, which is like you might have 30 basketball games. After you lose the first 2, you don't say, I'm just going to give up the rest of the season.
Yeah.
You keep playing.
Yes.
But in life, a lot of people stop playing.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I think that's great mental training too. I think
Yeah.
sports is great mental training because you have to show up to the next game even if you lost and you don't feel bad.
Exactly.
That you don't feel good, sorry. And one of the things, before I dive into that question, one of the things that you reminded me of was the Last Dance documentary. So there's that season that Michael Jordan, everyone is in agreement that he is one of the best players to be playing. And they keep losing.
And they didn't make the finals.
Right? They didn't make the finals. They lost. And then they realized they need to get the team. And they need to find, I think they're bringing Dennis Rodman. And then they start bringing in all these other players that strengthen. Whereas if they would have just said, we got the best player in the world, we just keep doing this, I'm not sure they would have got there, right? But the coach, Phil Jackson, and the team, they had to adapt. And so you're saying, why do we feel that pain in rejection and how do we deal with that? I think we feel that pain because we look at a failure, right? We look at it as a complete definition of us, right? We're looking at it as there's that famous statement of like, you know, failure is an event, not a person.
Right.
And I don't know who said it, but it's one of those statements that really clicks. Like failure is an event, not a person. Whereas we start thinking we are the failure. Like we say, I am a failure. Exactly, right? Like those are the words. I am a failure. I got rejected. And it's like, no, your application got rejected.
Yeah, your efforts.
Your effort, your specific effort at this moment in time got rejected. Your specific exam at this point got failed. You are not a failure. And so you have to disconnect and distance yourself from the event.
You know what's interesting is like no one who was successful at everything they did ever told a good story. Like the greatest stories are the ones who overcame failure and adversity. It's not the ones who are like, everything was easy for me. Everyone loved me. Everyone accepted my actions. I didn't have to work hard. And it just came to me effortlessly. Like people don't care about that.
No.
That's not a good story. That's not an inspirational human being.
Yeah.
It's the human that had to deal with adversity that we really admire and we look up to.
Yeah.
Even if they had some low moments, it's a much better story of hearing about someone's failure than hearing how they succeeded.
Totally. And that's a beautiful lesson that one of the biggest mistakes we make is we don't study the stories of the greats. So how many people's lives have you studied from start to finish?
Yeah.
If you've studied someone's life from start to finish, I genuinely believe this is like the core skill that's needed. I would say that the people I admire, I have studied their lives from start to finish. I know why they made bad decisions, what they consider to be good decisions. Like there's autobiographies and biographies out there. There's podcasts like ours where people can come and listen to people's stories. If you've not studied someone's story, then you can't follow that path because every time you hit a rejection, so every time I get rejected, I think of Steve Jobs getting kicked out of his own company.
Crazy, isn't
Every
it?
time I fail, I think about Michael Jordan losing a game. Every time I get tired of training, I think about Cristiano Ronaldo putting in that extra rep. Those are the visual cues that we need, but you only get those visual cues if you've done the research and the study. And then you go, oh, if Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company, but then still had the audacity at one point to go and build Pixar, then I think I'm all right if I just didn't get this job.
Yeah, and and Apple wouldn't be where it is today without him getting kicked out, learning the lessons, having humility, like gaining some compassion, all the things that people said he didn't have fully at that time. He learned by having to be kicked out, start something else, bring a new perspective.
Yeah.
What did you call it? The association?
Yeah, associating, yeah.
Like he was able to then go somewhere else and spot different trends, and then he came back to Apple and built it to where it is today, or helped build it to where it is today. And Apple wouldn't be where it is today without him being a rejection.
Which is crazy to just think of that. Yeah, exactly.
So if he would have kept saying, I'm going to keep doing it my way, and this is the way it is, it probably would have had some challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the more you study the lives of inspirational people, and that's what I'd say is everyone should pick their top 3 inspirational people and go and study their lives.
The full life, yeah.
Their full life.
Yeah.
And read the biography, the autobiography, listen to every podcast. I mean, like, seriously get immersed in that person, or the journey in the industry you're trying to make it in. And when you do that, you'll realize that your journey actually doesn't look that different from theirs.
Yeah.
It actually probably looks similar.
So how do we go inside our minds and say, okay, I'm getting rejected over and over again. I'm trying really hard. It's not working. How do we still deal with that emotional pain? Is it just the self-awareness that every great person had to go through this and this is just a timing thing? Like, how do we eventually just ease that? Or should we not try to ease that pain?
I don't think it's about easing it. I think it's about engaging it. You know, and I believe that the engaging does the easing, in my opinion, at least. So what I mean by that is, behind that pain is a understanding that I don't have this skill. Or is an understanding of I didn't try hard enough. Or is an understanding of, oh, maybe there's just another option. Because guess what? Sometimes you may have done the best pitch in the world and you just had an executive that didn't like your vibe.
Keep going. Keep asking different people.
Keep going. Like, you know, you've just got to realize that you have to engage that pain in discovery. And that eases it, because when you discover, like, like, for example, let's take my podcast. My podcast producer, the team that was meant to produce my podcast, pulled out 2 weeks before we launched my podcast. And I thought I had this big deal lined up. I was really excited. I'd never launched a podcast before. And I thought, oh yeah, this can be amazing. And I was in India meditating for my annual trip that I take. I come back and the first news I remember receiving is, by the way, this isn't happening anymore. And I'd set that I was going to launch my podcast on Valentine's Day 2019. And I had my episodes recorded with my wife, and I'd already gone out and made the content. So just to tee up how bad that 2-week notice was, I'd already gone to Monaco, interviewed Novak. I'd already interviewed Lily, I'd interviewed Russell Brand in London, I'd interviewed my wife, and obviously those people are all close friends and people I know, so they were very happy to be on the podcast even when it was new. So I'd already done all that effort, I'd already created all the content myself. All this podcast company was going to do was put it out there and help me market it a bit. And then they pull out 2 weeks before it comes out. And I'm going to myself, wow, okay, like I can either sit here and be really sad, or I can scrap together and figure it out. And so the only thing I realized was it actually turned out perfectly, because now I own my podcast
there you go.
And I'm completely aware of every part of the journey, and it gave me more confidence in myself that I could scrap together when I had to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is, that we lack confidence. We're waiting for someone else to tell us how we should feel about ourselves.
And I think if we go back to those 3 questions you said, like when you're feeling a failure over and over and over again, or you feel a sense of I'm not enough or whatever it may be, go back to asking those 3 questions to yourself. How can I be of service today or serve today? What can I love about myself? So even when everyone's saying no, what is there to love about me?
Correct.
To remind yourself and not be validated by other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And who do I want to be
yeah.
that I can love?
Yes, exactly.
So
who do I need to become?
Who do I need to become that I can love? And just keep focusing on the process, because the process is the prize.
Yes.
And focus on that journey.
Yes.
I'm curious about success then. You know, we've talked about how to deal with failure, but how do we deal with success? Because this is actually, when I ask most people, 50-50 of people are failure and success is their biggest fear. And some people say, why would you be afraid of success? But a lot of people are afraid to succeed because of the weight, the pressure. Can I maintain it? My family and friends aren't going to support me and they're going to try to pull me back down, all this stuff. How do we deal with success? Because we're not taught this growing up. So how do you think we should deal with it?
One of my favorite ways to deal with success is continue trying to be the least successful person in the room that you're in. I think there's those statements of like, you know, never
be the dumbest person.
Yeah, never be the smartest person in the room, etc. And I think it's the same with, if you become successful, don't just stand at the top of the mountain, don't just stand at the top of the building, go back down the stairs and keep building and keep living as that person that got you there, because you only got there because you started from the bottom. right? No one starts at the top. And so you started at the bottom and you built it up. And it was that mindset that you started with that got you there. And so you want to keep rediscovering that mindset and new parts of it, and new parts of that mindset too, where you're always trying to challenge yourself. And so for me, one of the best ways of dealing with success is keep expanding the goalposts, right? Keep widening the goalposts, keep making them harder to reach and challenging yourself. Because when you challenge yourself and you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're naturally humbled. Because you're naturally humbled when you're walking into spaces. I'm sure you feel this sometimes. Like, sometimes I walk into a room and I'm like, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
sitting on a table, I'm like, why should I be here?
Yeah, like, and there's part of it that's imposter syndrome, and that can have its own negativity, but part of that just lets me feel like a beginner again.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that feeling, and I go, this is amazing, because learning to be grateful and stop just thinking that, oh, I earned all of this and I did it all myself and I'm self-made. You start recognizing gratitude for all the people that got you there. So for me in success, first thing is be grateful for all your teachers, mentors, guides, people that got you there. The second thing is always keep challenging yourself, because the more you're out of your comfort zone, the more naturally you stay humble. You don't stay humble by trying to be humble. You become humbled constantly by trying to do stuff that's out of your league, which constantly makes you prepare, work, deepen what you have.
Study, all that stuff.
All of that stuff that makes you go there again. And then the third thing you do with success is, I think you try and share it with others. You try and use your platforms as an opportunity to give other people a platform so that they can come up as well, because you're reminded of what a beautiful gift you have.
Yeah, and how the people supported you or gave you an opportunity or gave you an interview or something early on.
There was someone successful who had to give you something in the
piece
beginning.
of a wisdom.
Coming on your podcast, giving you an insight.
A quote or whatever,
or even rejecting you. Even indirectly, someone had to do something.
That's true. You know, it's funny because I love this approach to having humility when you succeed. And I also think, let me know if you think I'm off here, I also feel like sometimes we get into a place where we're always putting it on other people, like, it's not about me, it's about the team, it's about this. Like, I see that a lot as well, where some people are more extreme, like, I'm the man, and then other people are like, you know what, it wasn't me at all, it was God, it was the team, like, I just showed up, So I think there's a balance of, I love this speech that Snoop Dogg gave, where I think it was like on the Hollywood Walk of Fame,
when he got his star.
And he says, like, I want to thank me for me. I want to thank me for all those late nights I put in, for all the hard work, for like overcoming the rejection. Like, he went on this thing, and I want to thank me for like showing up.
Yeah.
And I think we also should acknowledge ourselves for, yes, people helped us.
For sure.
We got guidance. We had all this access, but Snoop Dogg still had to show up.
Yeah.
He still had to put in the hours and the time to make the results. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, is it good to also acknowledge ourselves for the work we put in, the wins, the things we do?
Yeah,
Or is it all about being humble and acknowledging everything else?
I think it's about being honest.
Yeah.
It's honesty, right? Like, humility means to be honest. It's like the ability to say, this is what this person deserves credit for, and this is what I deserve credit for, and this is what this person. It's kind of like when you write the acknowledgements of your book. Right? You write. I mean, I remember doing that process and really thinking about, like, who's helped this book in different ways, and everyone gets their line in the acknowledgement who's made a difference. Now, your name goes on the front cover because you wrote the book. Like, you want everyone to receive the credit to the degree they merit it.
Yes.
And so you never want someone to feel like they didn't receive as much credit as they deserve. And at the same time, you don't want to give someone more credit than they deserve. The point of credit is to give it where credit's due.
Right.
And so for me, that's honesty, that's humility. Arrogance and pride is when you start to feel like only you did it on your own. And we all know that's just not true. Like, I can't say I did it all on my own. I can't anyway. I definitely can't say that. And I can't say it was all other people. And so that's where honesty and humility, I think, live together.
Yeah, acknowledging everything about it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, a lot of people haven't learned about how to deal with failure or success. And I don't think people have been trained how to believe in themselves. And for me, self-doubt is a big thing. I think it keeps people back from their dreams. And I'm curious, I'm going to share 5 words with you: beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, and intentions. How should we be thinking about beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, and intentions within our life? Because I think those 5 things dictate the results, the outcome, our feelings, all of this in our life based on beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, intentions. How should we be thinking about these things? How should we be speaking to help us build our self-confidence? What's your thoughts? I'm throwing a lot at you here, but...
No, let's go down each of them.
Beliefs?
So let's start with beliefs. So I think the first thing we have to do with beliefs is you have to realize everyone has them. It's not like you don't have beliefs just because you don't know what they are. Everyone has beliefs that they're currently living with. And I think life is about unlearning the beliefs you have and questioning the beliefs you have and then creating new ones. So the first thing I do with beliefs...
Unlearning.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
What if your parents had the answers and the way and the religion and this? Should we be questioning it all?
I think we should question it because questioning... questions are the most powerful invention in the world. Because questions either strengthen or weaken a belief based on the information. So questions aren't always from a place of doubt and cynicism and trying to find a weakness. Questions are a sincere request to figure out something. Like when we're sitting in these interviews, you're not sitting there trying to like be cynical or you want to help yourself and people who are listening and watching. And so that's a question, first of all. A question is not to catch someone off guard. A question is not to put someone down. A question is not to mislead people. A question is to uplift yourself and others. And when you ask a question in that way, the answer can either strengthen a belief you already have or weaken it or introduce you to a new one.
Why do we get so frustrated when our beliefs get questioned? When we have a belief that we put out in the world or we question someone's belief, why do people, when they get shaken in their beliefs, they attack, they break down, they whatever? Why is that? Why don't people just say, okay, that's interesting, let me look at that more?
Yeah, because we've defined our identity by our beliefs. So imagine you're on one of these assault courses and you're on this rope and you're being told to swing to the next rope. But in order to catch the next rope, you need to let go of this rope. But you're scared because this rope is currently your safety. So your current belief is your safety. And when you have to consider holding on to another belief and to entertain both together, you're scared that if that one doesn't hold, I'm basically going to fall. So people are scared that their belief is currently their safety net. And so even if it's wrong, it still makes them feel safe and they feel comfortable, and we don't want to feel uncomfortable, so we'd rather hold on to that safety net, right? So the only way to do it...
So how do we get comfortable with questioning our beliefs, but not being like holding on to nothing?
Well, realizing that you don't have to change your mind or you don't have to leave what you think in order to entertain or be curious about anything and explore. Like exploring, experimenting, and experiencing can either strengthen the belief you have or help you find a new one. But you have to do that middle 3 E's of exploring, experimenting, and experiencing. Yeah. And the problem is that we are just theoretically thinking. We're not experiencing the benefit.
And this is what I love about what you've done in your past. We've talked about this, how you grew up in a certain religion and then you started studying different religions to see, okay, let me just try this on and let me see what I like about this religion. And does that apply to, can I let something go in what I grew up in? Not making anything right or wrong, but just saying what works for you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think taking that experiential journey of asking questions from different beliefs allows you to just say, okay, yeah, this is working for me already. I don't need to change.
Exactly.
And I like this, and I'm going to keep growing and go from there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I desire for safety and security. So what you're speaking about was when I was around 16, maybe 15, we used to celebrate Christmas every year. And Christmas is probably my favorite time of year. We were talking about it. Like, I love listening to Christmas songs and I love Christmas decoration. And for me, Christmas is
presents.
And so I grew up in a culture where we celebrated Christmas, but Christmas was presents and a family dinner. And because I went to my school in England, we'd celebrate all the religious holidays. So we knew about all the main stories behind every major world religion. And so I remember celebrating Christmas at home, but thinking, I don't know that much about Jesus. And should I not be connecting with Jesus because that's why we even have this day? And so I started going to church in my local area just out of curiosity. I wasn't trying to be a Christian or trying to be a Hindu or trying to be anything. I was just interested and curious to be like, what is it about Christ that created a day that has lasted thousands of years that people all over the world celebrate? There must be something here. And so I feel like we get so scared because we want clear designations. We want like a clear title of I am this or I am that. And that gives us a sense of safety and security. But really answers come in the curiosity, not in the security.
Yeah.
Right?
What does that identity do to us, in a good way or in a negative way?
In a good way, it creates and this isn't just about religious identity, it's any identity.
Just
I'm
any
a podcaster,
identity. Any
or whatever. Yeah, it's not about
holding
religion.
on to this identity of yourself.
Yeah, so in the good sense, it surrounds you with more people like that. So if I'm a podcaster, I hang out with more podcasters, we learn more about podcasting, and that's a great thing because we all become better podcasters. The mistake is I go, oh, I can only be a podcaster, but I can't write a book. I can't make a video. I can't do that now. And that's the mistake that it makes. So it should be evolving. These titles that we give ourselves, these communities should help us evolve, not devolve.
Yeah.
And not stop us from expanding and growing.
Okay.
And so you want to be around people that are always curious and insightful.
What did you notice about the outside world maybe a year or 2 years into the flow of your learning, you know, about yourself and about the wisdom and the philosophy of being a monk? What did you start to notice the most common things of when you were just talking to people or just walking down the street and just being aware of what was happening?
Absolutely. It's actually, I've been quoting the Gita a lot, the Bhagavad Gita, but I'll quote a modern day, I guess somewhat modern day philosopher because I think this encapsulated it perfectly. He said that, this is Cooley, a philosopher, a writer, he said, today I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am, right? And I always feel that blows my mind every time I say it. I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. So we live in this perception of a perception of ourselves. So we've all seen the movie Inception. Imagine you get lost so far into someone's perception, and that's your perception. So if I think Lewis thinks Jay's good, then I feel good. But if I think Lewis thinks Jay's not good, then I don't feel good. And we live like that today. If I think someone thinks I'm confident, I feel confident. But if I think someone thinks I'm not confident, then I don't feel confident. And that's what I noticed when I lived as a monk. That people were so far removed from their own understanding of themselves that they were either lost living a life they didn't want to, lost living up to someone else's expectations, or lost becoming someone to impress someone else. And so people were their real identity is almost buried under 6 feet of multiple identities they've created. And that's what I started to notice. We have a social media identity, we have a LinkedIn identity, we have a Twitter identity, we have a Facebook identity. Then we have an identity we are to our boss. Then we have an identity we are with our Friday night friends. Then we have an identity we are to our Sunday people. And we've just created all of these identities. And if you ask people, who are you? We struggle to answer that question. And so as a monk, you're just taught to dig deeper beyond all those identities and kind of, again, bring out yourself rather than define yourself. So that was what I noticed. I just started to notice that people had a big lack of self-actualization. They were very disconnected from what they wanted, needed, and understood about themselves. And most people's identities were crafted by the reflection in this mirror of their mom, dad, friends, boss, partner, whatever it may be.
Right. How do we start to tap into self-realization better?
Yeah,
how do we learn that about ourselves?
So I think it starts even at a physical level. I'll give a basic example at a physical level. Anyone who's a physical fitness or a health coach will know that different bodies need different food, different sleep, different fluids. We don't all need the same thing. Me and you with different body types can't do the same workout. Right? We can't. I would die if I tried to lift what you lift. It just wouldn't work.
And I would die trying to sleep on the floor.
Right, exactly. No, but exactly, right? And that's the point. That our bodies have different tolerances in different things. That's self-awareness at the physical level already. So now what I realized by living as a monk is I can't survive off a 4-hour sleep a night. Like I realized that about my body.
When you were a monk?
Kind of when I was leaving and when I kind of came back to my real bed and I was just like, oh, I like this. This is, this is good.
Yeah.
Right? And I kind of came to that realization that I'm not able to function as effectively as I want to. I could when I was a monk because we meditated so much.
That just got you to a higher vibration.
Exactly. So now I meditate 2 hours a day. Then I used to meditate 4, 6 hours a day, plus the collective, plus the environment. All of that helps. So now that I don't have that, I can't. But if I have that, I can.
Could have just slept for those 4 hours and been better.
yeah. Exactly. So the point I'm making is that's physical self-awareness. We know our limits, we know what we can do, we know what we can't do, we know what our challenge is. On a mental level, what's self-awareness? Knowing what type of people I like to be with. Knowing who helps me grow and who drains me. Yeah. That's mental self-awareness. So self-awareness at every level, and then we go into the spiritual consciousness level. That's disconnecting from all these identities and understanding the identity that we are wired for generosity. And we're wired to serve. And only in service can we be happy. And that's us on a consciousness level. That's the identity of consciousness. Like water is wet, the sun is heating and light. Consciousness is service. Like that's how it fits.
Why are we wired for that?
We're wired for that because all of us as consciousness have been designed, and we see it since like even kids. Like I was giving this example of this beautiful, and you may have seen it. It went viral on Instagram. It was this little girl, probably about 2 years old, watching a cartoon, and she takes a handkerchief, and the cartoon character's crying, and she goes up to the television and she tries to wipe it off, right? And it's incredible because this girl's 2 years old, and she thinks this cartoon character animal's crying, and she gets a real tissue and tries to wipe it on the TV. Obviously, it doesn't work. And there's another one that I saw with this statue of this rabbit, and there's like 4 rabbits, and one rabbit's like falling off the end, and this little boy is trying to push the rabbit up, but it's a stone rabbit, it's just a statue, but he's trying to help it back up. So we see, and there was a great article in Wired about this, about how we're wired for generosity. Our brain is happier in service. Why are we that way? I'm not fully sure. But what I do know from my experience as a monk, or what I can verify, is that we've been created to connect and serve. Right? We've been created to connect and serve.
But you don't know why.
I can give you my opinion and the Vedic opinion. I can't tell you why for everyone.
Right.
The reason is, the main deep, or the main Vedic reason is that we've been created that way because that's our nature and that's what makes us most happy. Because this whole world is almost a school, an education system to make us realize that one truth. To make us realize that one truth. And we see that when we're serving, when we're doing that, we feel genuine happiness. But when we're trying to gain and greed and power and strength, we even feel empty as it slips through our fingers. So the why is because that allows us to connect to our deepest self, the happiest self that we have. And modern studies have shown that. So Michael Norton at Cambridge University, he did a study where they gave people $5, $10, $20 to spend on themselves. Have you seen this?
Go ahead though.
Yeah. And then they spent $5, $10, $20 on others. So people spent $5, $10, $20 on makeup, Starbucks, and normal stuff, right? That was the three makeup, Starbucks, and then something else, I can't remember. And then people who spent on other people, they also bought the same stuff. Starbucks was still in there, and they're buying all this stuff. What they found is that when people self-assess their happiness before and after, without knowing about this A/B test, people who spent the money on themselves didn't feel any happier or any less happier. But the people that spent on others felt 10 to 20% happier. And then he went and tried this out. This was a college in the United States. They then went and did it in Africa. They did it all over the world. And the stats and the pattern showed the same.
Wow.
That we're wired for generosity. We're wired to serve. To make us realize that that's our real nature. That's our greatest self-awareness.
Wow.
Right? So that's the Vedic opinion. And that's why you had to probe me to go to why it is. I know why it is, but I want to give people an answer that I feel they can connect with.
So what was one of the greatest lessons you learned in those 3 years then?
Do you want me to share the one I shared before or share another one? I've got
share another one.
Yeah, okay, I'll share another one. This is probably one of my favorite things, and it's because this was what I learned on my first day of monk school. So if you think about what you learned on the first day of school when you were 3 or 4, if you remember what it was,
A, B, C, D.
Yeah, exactly. Alphabet, the numbers, right? 1 to 10, A, B, C. right? The 26 letters of the alphabet. So I remember my first day of monk school. I've just shaved my head. I'm now wearing robes. I still look like I'm from London, like I can't get away with it. I'm walking around and I notice this monk who's teaching. This monk's 10 years old and he's teaching a group of 5-year-old monks, right? And I see him teaching. He looks like an adult, like,
wow.
You know, his ability to like teach these 5-year-olds and conduct himself, and he's got this great aura about him. And so I'm kind of eavesdropping on his class. I can't obviously go and sit with a bunch of 5-year-olds, even though I really want to, because I'm like, I feel like a 5-year-old next to that 10-year-old. And I went up to him and I said, what are you doing? And he said, oh, well, we just taught their first class ever. And I said, oh, cool. And he said, well, what did you learn in your first class at school? And I said, oh, well, I learned the alphabet and numbers. And I said, well, what did they learn? He said, do you want to know what they learned on their first day of school? I said, yeah, of course. He said, the first thing that we teach them, the first thing you learn at monk school is learning how to breathe. I said, why? He said, because we're taught that the only thing that stays with you from the moment you're born to the moment you die is your breath. All your friends, family, the country you live in, all of that's going to change. Mm-hmm. The only thing that doesn't change, that stays with you from the moment you're born to the moment you die, is your breath. And he said, notice, when you get stressed, what changes? Your breath.
Right.
When you get angry, what changes? Your breath. When you're sad, what changes? Your breath. When you're happy, what changes? Your breath. Every emotion is experienced with the change of the breath. So he said, when you learn how to navigate and manage your breath, you can actually navigate any situation in life. And I was just blown away. I was just like, wow. And then I remember researching it and noticing how athletes were taught how to breathe, musicians, singers, especially those who play wind instruments, who have to reach really high notes. They're all trained how to breathe because they have to use their breath in challenging, stressful, pressure-filled situations.
Right.
But I was like, so are all of us. Mm-hmm. You've got to go on stage in front of 10,000 people. You've got to go to a concert. You just lost a deal or a contract. Our breath changes in all those scenarios, yet we don't know how to use our breath to change our life.
Right.
And so for me, that was a huge learning point where I just thought, wow, that's what you're taught. The priority is on the root of things, not the leaf or the symptoms.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing about living as a monk. You're not dealing with your challenges at symptomatic level. You're dealing with it at root level. Right? People say, oh, if you're stressed out, just take a stress pill. If you're stressed out, just go to get a massage. If you're stressed out, just relax, watch Netflix and chill. But all that's doing is pacifying you, escape for that hour, 2 hours, maybe a week. But going to the root of it and learning how to change your breath means you can manage any situation in life. And that principle, that's an example of the principle which is so much deeper, that always go to the root. It will take longer, but it will last longer. Right? If you go to the root, it takes longer, but it lasts longer. Mm-hmm. But if you go for the symptom, you get it quick and it
never lasts.
And it never lasts. And we don't know that.
Yeah.
So that was the deepest principle I learned as a monk. You always go to the root. Cut down the root of that weed in your heart. Cut down the root of that weed in your mind. Don't just let it grow and kind of water a little bit and snip, cut it a bit. Like just really go to the root and just knock it out there. You know, just get rid of it. Get a big axe and cut it down.
Wow. Are there any weeds in your life right now?
Loads.
In your heart or in your mind?
Always. My daily practice is to refine my intention. The biggest weeds that we all get is on our intention. So when I say intention, I mean my current intention is to use everything I've been given, everything that I have, in the service of others. So I want to use the following that I have to help people. I want to use the money that I have to help people. I want to use the network that I have to help people. Mm-hmm. But every day that intention, which is a beautiful little plant that's growing, gets weeds around it. No, do it for the money. I hear that voice, right?
Do it for the fame.
Just do it for the fame, do it for the followers, do it for this. All these weeds are like going around my real intention every day. Every day. That's a weed. A weed is the intention that you don't want. And the problem is, sometimes you've let it grow so much, the weed looks like the plant, right? The weed looks like your intention, and you start believing it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. So for me, my daily practice is going back in, reflecting on what is my voice right now in my head? What am I saying to myself? And I'm hearing, make that deal, it makes a lot of money, do this, do that, do this, more followers, fame, all that stuff, and I'm cutting it down. I'm cutting that weed every day. And you got to do it every day, because the more you're surrounded by that energy,
right,
the more it's going to keep creeping in, like a creeper weed, right? Like, I'm just using the plant analogy because I don't garden at all, by the way. Like, I have no idea, but...
What's the intention you set every morning for yourself then? If it's going back to the core of what you really want to create, what is that thing you want to create the most? Service?
Yeah, service. To help people find their purpose, whatever that may be, and help them help other people find their purpose. I think Mark Zuckerberg said it brilliantly at Harvard. He was saying that finding your purpose isn't enough. You have to help other people find theirs. And I know you're passionate about this. Whatever that definition is, but it has to lead everyone. So whether I meet a celebrity, an entrepreneur, or whether I meet someone who's starting out, I'm always asking them the question, how can you use what you have to make a difference in the life of other people?
Yeah.
Because if you start there, everything else will work out. But if you're starting from the point of what am I going to get, then you're always going to feel disconnected. And I see that. I see people who live like that and feel pain in their lives every day. I see that. It's not like some conceptual philosophy. We see it. I see people who are only in it for themselves, and they feel disconnected, dissatisfied every single day. And then you see the other extreme where people are just trying to give too much, more than they even have themselves, and they also feel disconnected.
Wow.
And again,
and they have nothing at all.
And they have nothing at all, right? So we know, again, attachment and aversion, two sides of the same coin. So we want to be in that dynamic balance of growth, but always to give.
Yeah. So
I always think, how can I go 3 steps deeper so that I can move 3 steps forward so I can give 3 times as much? Right? That's always my mentality. How do I go deeper to go more forward to give more?
Yeah.
And if I can get those 3 in action for that reason. See, it's all about the reasoning. You can do anything you like, but it's why are you doing it?
Yeah,
we know
of course.
that, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why I start with identity is because I think that's the root of all our challenges. And the first step to thinking like a monk is starting at the root, not starting at the symptoms or the superficial or the surface level, but let's go to the root. If you're playing a role, if you're wearing a mask, if you're dressed in clothes that are not yours, then you end up living a life that's not yours. Yeah. And in the book, I give this example of method acting.
Yes, with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, I'm a massive movie junkie, and I love method actors. So people like Heath Ledger, of course, from the Dark Knight series. You've got Jared Leto. So Jared Leto, when he played the Joker in, this is not in the book, in Suicide Squad, he used to send dead rats in the mail to his co-stars.
He did not.
He did, because he was trying to get into the mindset of how someone that perverted would behave. And then Daniel Day-Lewis, when he was filming for Gangs of New York, he's actually wearing these coats that are centuries old so that he can get into character when he's off camera. Yeah, when he can feel it, right? He's not wearing watches. He's not carrying around his mobile phone. They're speaking in the accents. And he talks about how he actually went crazy. Because guess what? When you fake being someone for so long, you think it's your reality. And that's what happens to all of us. We play a role at work, we play a role at home, we play a role with our family, we play a role with our friends, and then we think that role is us.
Right.
And we lose ourselves. And to me, that is the core reason why we're chasing things that are not important to us. We're unhappy despite reaching accolades, and we feel dissatisfied.
So what should our identity be then?
Our identity should start with unlearning everything that we think we know about ourselves.
Okay.
And
how do we unlearn?
So the best method of unlearning is this. First, and I'm going to get really strategic and tactical because I think that people need to know what to do rather than a concept. The first thing you do is write down everything you currently are chasing in your life. Make a long list.
Your goals, your dreams,
your goals, your dreams,
accomplishments.
Anything that you're currently chasing and pursuing.
Okay.
Write them down. You can write down 3, you can write down 5, you can write down 10, depending on how ambitious you are. Second line, ask yourself, what is the source of that? Where did you get that idea? Did you get that idea from a TV show you saw? Did you get that idea from your parents? Did you get that idea from your mom and your dad, your sister, your cousin? Did you get that idea because your friend just got proposed to on Instagram? Did you get that idea because your friend just got promoted? Did you get that idea because you just broke up?
Right.
Or did you get that idea because you just feel it when you do it, that you feel alive?
So
Ask
give me a
that.
specific example that you had when you were 15, 18, was like a goal or accomplishment that you were chasing and where it came from.
Absolutely. So my goal when I was young was to be an investment banker. And when I really asked myself, where did that come from? It came because in my community, small community in London, the most successful person financially was an investment banker. So I believed you had to be an investment banker to be successful.
Right.
So when I asked myself that question, Where does that come from? It comes from society's version of success, not mine. And then the third thing you ask yourself is, well, then what is mine? What is coming from inside of me? And if you just do that 3-step process, now what you're doing is you're filtering out the noise and you're starting to listen to your voice. The thing is, you've got a voice inside of you, but it's quiet. It's like Jay, like take note of me, like Lewis, you know, and it's just like trying to get through, and the noise of everyone else's opinions is so loud. So this way you filter it.
How do we start to find out what we truly want then? Not based on what other people think is success. How do we listen to ourselves? And if you've been chasing something your whole life, how do you say, well, actually, that's not what I want. This is.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we confuse inexperience with being unqualified. So because we've not tried a lot of things, we just naturally believe that we can't be that good at them. So if I've never spoken on a stage, I just think, oh, I'm probably not good at that. Or if I've never played golf, I'd probably think, oh, I'm probably not good at that. And so we start writing off things without even trying them. So the best method I can share with someone is take the next month, take the next 4 weekends in the month, that gives you 8 days, and get really tactical. Every single day.
That's why you're playing tennis a lot right now.
Yeah, playing tennis. Take the 8 days, go join a course, an online course or workshop, go and shadow a friend, go to a seminar, a conference, go to reading a book, listen to a podcast. Go and expose yourself to 8 different things in a month.
8 different things?
8 different things in a month. And guess what? In a month, you will have learned what you probably would have learned in 8 years, because most of us test 1 new thing a year. Maybe, if that, exactly, right? Like some people don't even do that. But if you do 8 different things in a month, and this is how you have to see it. If you went to 8 different restaurants in a month, you ask yourself after you eat a meal, like, I had that burrito or I had that taco. Did I like it? Right? The first question you ask yourself is, did I like it? You
gotta try it first.
You gotta try it first. You gotta go to the restaurant. There's no point. So you gotta say, did I like it? The second question you ask yourself is, why did I or why did I not like it? Like, why is so important? And I think too many people just go, I like it or I don't like it. Why didn't I like it? And the third question you have to ask yourself, really, really simple, is, do I want to do it again? And if you do, that's where you start uncovering. So my point is, inexperience. Do not misinterpret inexperience for a lack of qualification. I'm guessing you're doing things in your life right now that you would have written off if you didn't try. I know you've talked about with writing a best-selling book. You've talked about it with this amazing documentary.
This documentary.
I mean, I never believed I could do half the things I'm doing today, and you know that because we met when I was just creating content on social media. And it's like now when you see things expand, you're like, you don't know until you give it a go and ask yourself, do I enjoy it?
Yes. So I grew up very competitive, and you talk about competition as one of these, I can't remember if it's like 4 or 5 different things, and competition is one of the things that's actually like, I wish I had the page written down here, but you talk about competition as like not the highest level of ourself. Right?
Yes.
In my entire life, I was competitive, was driven to beat other people. And in the last 7 years, I've shifted so much. I'm still competitive, still want to win, but I'm not like hurt if I lose. I'm not upset. It doesn't defeat me emotionally. Whereas before, it used to be like this was my identity, winning. I had to win. Now it's like, okay, what did I learn? What did I gain from this experience? Did I have fun? Did I enjoy it? Did I inspire people even if I didn't win in this situation? In chapter 2, you talk about negativity, and the quote you use is it is impossible to build one's own happiness on the unhappiness of others. Does competition and unhappiness link together in your mind? Like, if we need to be competitive to be happy in order if someone else loses, how do we manage ourselves in this competitive world of winning in sports, of building a bigger business, of these different things, being #1 on the New York Times bestseller list? How do we manage that with this world we're in, but also wanting to be happy at the same time?
Yeah, what a great question. So the way I see it is that competition in and of itself is not good or bad. And this is like the monk mindset on 99% of things, that this mug is not good or bad. It could be filled with water or it could be filled with poison.
Yes.
And so competition, I'll give you an example. As monks, our competition is in how much love and respect we show to each other.
That's your competition?
Like, that's what you compete on.
Or how long can we meditate for?
No.
I can meditate longer than you.
So if any monk is sitting, and I did this plenty of times.
Really?
If I sat there and I thought, oh yeah, look at him, he's scratching his back. He got out like
he
that.
moved.
Your meditation just got destroyed. Right? All the value. And so monks will never ask how long you meditate. They focus on how deep you meditate. And someone who meditates deep doesn't go on about how deep it was.
Right.
But you compete for showing respect. You compete for serving each other. You compete for how well you can collaborate. And I feel like you live this.
Yes.
Like
yes.
I feel like you have this.
I didn't used to do that.
Yeah.
But the last
you
7
do
years,
that now.
yeah,
Like you
of
think
course.
like a monk. Like I feel like we're always trying to find a way where we can be better friends to each other and support each other.
Yeah.
And so you're competing on that. And that's a positive competition that I think you can have. So you can still use, and this is the beautiful thing about the monk mindset, you can use any thing in a positive way. Now, in your second question about what does it mean about business and New York Times bestseller lists and being number one, this is how I see it. If while you're writing your book, if while you're recording your podcast, if you're sitting there going, I hope this is going to be number one. This better be number one.
I hope I sell more copies
I hope
than
I
this
sell more
person.
copies than this person who's launching at the same time, because that's the only way. Well, guess what? Now the quality of your output right now has just dropped. Because guess what? You're now living 75% in the future and you're 25% right now. And guess what? This 25% is going to define that future goal and result.
And your happiness.
And your happiness.
Whether you get the result or not.
Totally. Whereas for me, when I was writing my book, and of course I want my book to be a best-selling book. Of course I want my podcast to do well. Of course, we don't do anything for it to be lost. Like no one does that. But what I do know is that when I'm creating, when I'm producing, when I'm writing, that's all I'm doing. See, the truth is that only 2% of the world's population can multitask. Now, the crazy thing is when...
Who are those 2%?
When 2%, when people hear that, they think, I'm in that 2%. Like everyone thinks that they're in that. But most of us are the 98%.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there is no such thing as multitasking. What it is fast switching between two tasks. So the quality is just dropping.
Because you cannot do two things at one time.
You cannot. No one genuinely can do two things at once.
I guess you could maybe like pat your head and do this at the same time.
Yeah.
But you can't do something productive at the same time, right?
Or creative. And so what I'm saying is that when you're sitting here going, this needs to be number one, you are reducing that thing's ability to be number one because it now doesn't have your full focus.
Right.
So that's the difference maker, that you can want to be number one, there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't keep comparing what number one is to someone else's goal too, because everyone's got a different trajectory. Like there are some people that are kind of come in and do really well at one thing and you're going to do really well at another. And that's why competition has to first be in your space. Like don't compete in a space that's not yours.
Right.
Because now you're just trying to be someone else again and you get lost in the identity.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You talk about the four motivations. One is fear, desire, duty, and love. And as I was reading this, fear is kind of like the making sure you have your basic needs met, right? It's like, do I have shelter? Do I have food? Am I protected? Am I safe? Living in fear, it's being driven to get out of that fear, I guess, right? Or driven by that. Then you have desire, which is probably what was most of my life. Was one of my main motivation, which was desire, seeking personal gratifications through success, wealth, and pleasure. That's probably most of like, I don't know, any teenage boy, who's just like watching the media and seeing what their friends do. They're driven by desire. Girls, money, cool toys, results, success. I don't want to generalize it, but that's what I saw a lot growing up.
Sure,
right?
me too.
Now, the last two, the third and fourth, are duty and love. Duty is motivated by gratitude, responsibility, and the desire to do the right thing. And love is compelled by care for others and the urge to help them. And I feel like in the last 7 years, it's been more duty and love. It's more like mission focused. And there's an amount of happiness that I've never felt before until I reached practicing duty and love. And I remember I never was able to fall asleep at night until about 7, 8 years ago without an hour and a half of just anxious, anxiety, stress, concern, worry. And when I shifted from seeking personal gratifications to being motivated by a mission and love and gratitude, it's like I started to fall asleep within minutes. And it's crazy. But why do we live in this fear motivation and desire motivation when it only causes us a lot of pain?
Great question, man. And thanks for sharing your journey too, because I mean, everyone, as you can see, Lewis is already thinking like a monk. So it's great. I love it. But So yeah, great question. The challenge is that we think things come with emotions.
Feelings.
We think things come with feelings and emotions, and guess what? They don't. So if you chase money,
Well, they might for a moment, right? Or they won't.
I don't think they even do.
It's a false sense
It's
of
such
feeling.
a false sense of feeling. I don't. Maybe for a moment, but it's so short-lived that it's not even worth counting almost. So it's like when you think that I'm chasing money, guess what? You will get money.
Yep.
And that's great. Money is really important. Money is a really important resource. But guess what? Money's not now going to fill that gap, that void, that feeling, that emotion that you're missing in your life.
What are
And
most
so
people missing?
We're missing a deep sense of love. I think the biggest need in the world, as we've heard many times before from all the ancient texts, they summarize it like this: to love and be loved. Like that is the need of humanity. To love and be loved. And when we don't experience that, we then start looking for status. We then start looking for money. We then start looking for recognition.
To help us give the feeling of false sense of love.
Correct. And the challenge is because most of us didn't experience that from our parents, and this is the key thing, what we crave in life is what we did or didn't get from our parents. What our parents did give us is what we continue to crave, or what they didn't give us is what we continue to crave. So you'll find that most people's love languages that they chase are things that their parents didn't give them. So if their parents didn't give them time, they now crave everyone's time. If their parents didn't give them gifts, they crave gifts. If their parents didn't give them acts of service, they're craving those acts of service. So it's because of our childhood. And if we don't learn to process all of that experience, which most people never get the time to do, and I empathize with that because I've had to go through that. I've seen me repeating my parents' patterns.
What was the thing you were craving?
So I would crave, a big thing for me was I would crave surprises and gifts because—
That's your thing.
Yeah, that's my thing.
Still is your thing.
It's still my thing.
Yeah.
And I—
Did your parents not do that for you?
No, they did. My mom did a lot of it.
That's why you still crave it.
Correct. So my mom would always, every year on my birthday, she'd always surprise me with the one thing I wanted. And I wasn't spoiled growing up. I didn't have a lot growing up, but she would get that one thing, whether it was like a Power Rangers toy or whether it was whatever it was, you know, something, you
Video
know.
game or
Yeah,
something,
thing is you want as a kid, right? And she would always surprise me with that. And that became so deep rooted. Now I'll give you an example. When I then married my wife, you just expect people to know that.
That they're going to do the same thing.
Totally. And so
She
now
didn't do that.
No, because I'm expecting my wife to be like my mom in the sense of I expect her to surprise or show me love in the same way. And she doesn't know that. She's not a mind reader. I can't expect her to know that. So it took communication. It took time for me to explain that. So anyway, I think that's where it stems from. That desire, it doesn't come from any— you can say it comes from society and education. Of course it does. But I think the deepest place it comes is what your parents did or didn't give you. That's where it comes from.
Yeah. Thoughts are something, what do we have, 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. 80% are negative.
Yeah.
And most of them are repeating thoughts.
Yes.
So let's talk about thoughts.
Yeah, my favorite technique that I talk about in the book is called spot, stop, swap.
Yep.
And so that theme is all around how thoughts are meant to be spotted, stop and reflect, and then swap. And what I mean by that is, if you've got a thought that's repeating, like you said, and is negative, I'm guessing you don't want that thought around for too long. So you want to spot, when does that thought arrive? Does it arise when I'm with certain people? Does it arise when I'm on a particular social media platform? Does it arise when I go to a particular place? Where is that? What is the seed of that thought, right? So once I identify that, I now need to stop, spend some time in stillness and go, is this thought benefiting me? Is this thought useful to me? Is this thought actually leading me to who I want to become? And if it's not, I need to swap it with a thought. So one of my favorite ways of, let's take an example of like, I feel less than. I feel like I'm not achieving anything.
I'm no good.
I'm no good. I'm not good enough. So you spot that and you go, oh, I always feel that when I'm going through this particular Instagram profile because I'm looking at someone who I think is better than me. Okay, what do I swap that with? You don't swap that with you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're incredible, because you may not believe that yet.
Yeah.
But you stop it. You swap it with, I feel confident when. I feel attractive when. I feel happy and joyful when. And you figure out what is that thing that I need to be and do to feel that emotion.
Yeah,
Because
so
you
don't lie to yourself.
don't lie to yourself,
Yeah.
because lying to yourself is not going to get too far.
And you're losing your integrity as well to yourself.
Totally.
Which makes you less confident.
Yeah, like I feel healthy when I exercise.
Yeah.
I feel happy when I spend time with my wife.
Yeah, and there's a line that everyone uses, fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
but it's really, you should be facing it till you make it. Like, face that fear, face that doubt, and say, okay, what can I do to improve this until I make myself feel better about it?
If you want to get a result for the long term, yes.
Yes.
Like if you just want to make yourself feel better instantly, then do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But if you really want to create a life that's fulfilling,
I love that.
that's
Yeah.
thoughts.
Thoughts can transform your life in a positive way or a negative way.
Completely.
And I feel like that's the foundation of our life, is what we think.
The best place to talk about that, though, with thoughts is the movie Inception. So you look at how a thought is planted into someone's mind, and how in that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio in his wife's mind plants a thought that this is not real. And that thought grows into a belief.
A belief that is so strong, it's crazy.
Right? And it's like, that is literally what a thought can do. And you see that in the Joker movie. So I did a whole episode last year, which was all about like mental health and the Joker. And you look at the Joker's stories, he's trying to bring joy to others, but everyone treats him badly. And so the thought sets in of, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, my father doesn't want me, no one thinks I'm funny, everyone makes fun of me, even when I go on TV, everyone's laughing at me. That idea becomes his reality. Now I get that that's a fiction movie, but the point is still that we see, even in today's world, that thoughts have the ability to become, I forget the word that Leonardo DiCaprio uses in the movie, but that thought...
Yeah, cancer or some type of...
Yeah, it's like a cancer in the mind, right? It like really just expands. And so I think we have to be so good at spotting, stopping, and swapping thoughts in the middle.
Okay. So beliefs, we want to ask about everything and question everything.
Yeah.
Spot, stop, swap, thoughts. What about words?
Is all about. So
What is this?
So it's called Harvard List of Emotions, but I kind of changed the name to Emotional Vocabulary because I think it sounds better.
Okay.
I think it sounds better.
Okay.
Good, bad,
Yeah.
okay, fine, So it's like, how's your week going? Good. How's your day been? Bad. How are you feeling?
Okay, yeah.
Right, literally, like we use such limited we use such limited emotional vocabulary. So this table that Harvard has made, which anyone can find just by typing in Harvard List of Emotions on Google, what that does is that it shows you that when you say you're sad, what do you actually mean? So it gives you all this list of emotions that sit under the word sad. Are you irritated? Are you offended? Are you disappointed? Have you been let down? The more you expand your emotional vocabulary, the more you can diagnose how you feel.
Interesting.
And the more you can tell your partner or your friend,
This is how I'm feeling.
this is how I'm actually feeling. And this is one of the biggest mistakes with words, is that we think our words mean the same thing. Now, when you say love, you might think forever. And when I say love, I might think for tonight, right? And that is literally how the word love or care or marriage or forever gets misused, abused, and thrown about, because we both mean different things. And our meanings are based on our backgrounds
Our
and
beliefs.
our beliefs, but how we were born and how our parents
our culture,
treated
our experience.
everything. Yeah, it forms our meaning. So I really believe that in a relationship, in our communication with words, define words. When you say, yeah, we're best friends or friends, what does that mean to you? When we're business partners, what does that mean to you? A contract, in a financial legal sense, is to define the terms.
Right.
But in our emotional sense, we also need to define the terms. And we don't do that emotionally enough. And that's why we feel emotionally like someone broke the contract. And you have nothing to hold them to because you never made a contract.
You never communicated.
You never communicated
the
it.
meaning of these words.
Exactly. And that's why words are so powerful, but they're only powerful when we agree on the definition.
Yeah. What are the words we should eliminate from our vocabulary, and what are the words we should be adding or using more of?
Words that we should use more of in our life are words that give us the right feeling we want to feel. So I'll give you an example. Instead of saying, now I work super hard, I do get tired, and I do get exhausted sometimes. I'm very aware of it and I'm cautious of it. And I realized that for a long time, I just kept repeating, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. And I'd say it to my wife, I'd say it to my team.
I'm overwhelmed. Stressed.
Yeah, and I still do it sometimes. So it's not that I'm perfect, but you're making me aware of it. And I say that, and I started to realize that, okay, it didn't make me feel better by saying it. And actually what I was trying to do was get validation from someone else to be like, I know how hard you work and you're amazing and blah, 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 blah. And so, you're really doing it for a reaction.
Yes.
And then I started to realize, well, I am tired, but why don't I just say, I'm going to make some time to nap today. Mm-hmm. I need to find some time today to rest. I need to make sure that I, get some time to myself today. Like when you flip it, not by just saying, oh, I feel amazing, because I don't feel amazing. Again, you don't want to lie to yourself, but you're trying to create words that help you actually get what you need. So me saying I'm tired, really what I need to be saying is, I need to get some more rest today. I better sleep early. Yeah. And when you go, to Radhi, you know what? I think I'm going to sleep early tonight. That's perfect, because now I'll sleep early and I'll get the rest and I won't be tired. Yes. If I go, hey Radhi, I'm so tired, it just creates this negative pattern of complaining and whining and creating that in ourselves.
What's the difference between a positive mantra and fake positive thinking? Because there's, the power of positive thinking, but if it's not accurate to where you're currently at, it could be out of integrity with yourself and you could feel off.
Yeah.
So how do we have a positive mantra or a saying or thoughts or words that support our growth as opposed to, I'm fine when you're not fine?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Because when I'm tired, if I was told to just say to yourself, I'm healthy, I'm excited, I'm energetic, I may survive for 30 minutes more, but that's not going to survive for 30 days or 3 years. And so for me, I find connecting positive mantras to an act or an action. For example, if I'm tired and me saying, I think I need to eat on time, that action is what's going to solve the fatigue long term. Or me saying I need to sleep early tonight, that action is going to solve the fatigue long term. So to me, the positive mantra needs to be linked to an action and a habit that's actually going to relieve you in the long term of that pain point, right?
Yeah.
Or like, I need to get my schedule to be more organized on Monday mornings. And my favorite example with that, again, I don't know if, this with the words is the definition that I think we see this most prominently in is the definition of time. So many friends will come to me and say, my partner doesn't spend enough time.
Or I don't have enough time.
And what they're really saying is, from a partner point of view, is I really want energy, intimacy, and presence and attention.
It's attention.
You're not asking for time, you're asking for attention. Mm-hmm. And I've had friends who have gone on weekends away with their partners and they'll come back and their partner on Monday morning will say, I wish we had more time together. And the partner's thinking, well, but we just spent the whole weekend together. But they're like, no, because you were doing your work and by the beach and you were reading your book and I was trying to take care of the kids. And you realize it was never time. It was attention. It was intimacy. It was presence. And so if we don't define those words, all right, words are all about definitions. If you don't define them, people will break that contract and that emotional contract, and you have nothing to hold them to.
Well, you didn't have you guys weren't aligned to your contract.
No, not at all.
You just had your belief that like, oh, she understands me, he understands me. Like, this is the way it is in my life, and it must be the same way in their life.
Exactly.
What are the actions we should be adding more of in our life and the ones we should be eliminating?
I think actions that we should be adding more of in our life are actions that create positive habits. I think it has to be habits orientated. It has to be stuff that we can repeat. And in Think Like a Monk, I talk about the 4 key habits in your day, which are thankfulness, inspiration, meditation, and exercise, which is the acronym of time. So make more time in your day for thankfulness, inspiration, meditation, and exercise. Those are 4 actions that I think if everyone wants to take in their day, this is what happens. When you're thankful, you boost your immunity, you boost your self-confidence, you boost your mood.
Yeah.
Because you go, oh, people love me. That means I matter. People care about me. That means I have something to care about. So it boosts your mood. And then when you tell people that you're thankful, you now boost connection and relationship. And when you thank someone, you now boost the feeling of, I have people in my life that care about me and I care about them. So much comes out of that one action. inspiration or insight, listening to a podcast, reading a book, reading a quote. When you do that, again, you feel excited, you feel enthused, you feel like you're learning, you feel like your mind actually works and that they can go somewhere. So that's a great action. Meditation, of course, we've talked about at length in the beginning. And exercise. People just don't understand that we could solve so many of our challenges simply by sleep and exercise and diet. Like those three things
change your life.
Could change your life. And we have to just get focused on one at a time. And so in actions, I talk about this thing in principle is we want things to be small steps, but big priorities. So if you want to change an action in your life, it needs to be a big priority, and then you need to break it down into small steps. What we try and do is we try and change everything at the same time.
Yeah, we're like, okay, I'm going to only eat lettuce. I'm going to work out 3 hours a day. I'm going to sleep 10 hours. I'm going to be... It's like you need to shift your identity around like the thing and take the small steps towards it, but don't try to do everything right away.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be healthy and in shape, then you just need to change your identity to say, I am Mr. Fitness.
Yeah.
Right? I am fitness.
Yes.
And I'm going to start living my habits and my actions towards being in fitness, in good health.
Yeah.
But you can't change every habit right away.
No.
Because then you'll get burnt out after 2 weeks. You'll be like, this is exhausting.
Yeah.
I'm not Mr. Fitness.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
you need to change your mindset and then take those small actions.
Exactly. And there's a beautiful quote from, this is more like an underpinning, actually this kind of leads to the next one. We'll save it for the next one.
Yep. Intentions.
Yeah. So there's a beautiful quote from the Dalai Lama where he said that we're born to help people, and if we can't help them, let's at least not hurt them. And I think that's the intention, that you want to leave every person happier than you found them, leave every place cleaner than you found it, leave every project more productive than you found it. Like you want to feel that if you couldn't uplift something or someone, at least don't pull it down. And I think that when you live like that in your intention, people feel that. This isn't necessarily something that you even have to say or do. People feel that when you just leave a place and all you wanted to do was give your energy in a positive way. So to me, intention is just coming from a place of how do I leave every person just a little bit happier than I found them. I don't have to change their life.
Right.
But how
Try
do
not to hurt them.
Try not to hurt them.
With everything that's been happening in the world right now, I'm hearing a lot of people say that intention isn't enough. Like having a positive, I had a good intention to like say the right thing, but it offended someone and it impacted them in a negative way.
Yeah.
So how do people understand that it's about intention, but it's also you might hurt people, you might offend people, even if you weren't intending to? How do we shift that in our mind and our actions to sync up our intentions to actually impacting people in a positive way?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like
It makes so much sense. A real deep intention means that you will care and do the research and study. And often we have a good intention, but it's not the deepest, greatest intention, so we try and wing it.
It's based on our beliefs.
Correct.
As opposed to doing the research of other things.
Correct. And so really good intentions make you ask questions and make you care and make you compassionate. And sometimes that doesn't mean saying a lot. Sometimes that means listening, learning, receiving, understanding. And I think when we are trying to show our good intentions, we say a lot and it may be taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
But when we really want to be our good intentions, we're just listening and learning and asking good questions. And you do that really well. Like, you know, whenever, even if you're this person, even if we're on a dinner, like Lewis will ask this many questions, even if we're having dinner, and we'll go back and forth and I'll ask questions. But you're a really curious and inquisitive person in a positive sense. And that's why people always feel very comfortable around you to open up and share, because they feel that you're really listening.
Right.
And so I think that's a big part of it, is that when we're doing that. The second part is, even if you do all of that, there will be people that get offended.
Yes.
So even if you master the way of communicating and you really care and you do the research, there'll be people that get offended. And what you have to realize is that there are just so many more triggers right now.
So many.
To everyone's lives. And there are deep triggers there too. There's historic triggers. There's so much going on that you can't make it about you. And I think sometimes we're like, oh, how did they get offended me? I tried so hard. But it's like, don't make it about you, because there's so many more things at play here. There's so much more going on. So again, we try and reflect it because we want to be liked or considered to be supportive.
Yes.
But we're not realizing there's just so much more at play here.
So much
and
more.
so as long as you did your part and you tried.
One of your mentors was a teacher there at this ashram, right?
Yes.
Who said, time for you to go.
Yes.
So what was that conversation like when he said, you're no longer welcome?
Yeah.
And how did you start to plan for your exit?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been there for 3 years. I've literally traded everything. Been celibate for the first time in my life for that long. It's, you know, for that long ever, like it's huge.
Yeah.
And then he sits down with me and he says, I think you'll be able to share what you've learned if you leave. You'll be able to share this with everyone if you leave. And I felt like it was his nice way of saying, you're not ready to be a monk, like get out of here. Right? That's how it felt. It felt like I'd failed, and it felt like he was like breaking up with me. Like I equate it to a divorce. It was almost like him saying to me, it's not you, it's me, you know, it's not working out. Like it kind of felt like that.
Is this the same monk that who came to speak at college?
No, it was his teacher.
Oh, wow.
So his teacher, so like a...
Even
like
more so.
Yeah, even more so, right? Like, and it kind of felt, it wasn't disingenuous on his part. It was a reality check. It was a reality check that this wasn't going to last forever. And it was one of the most toughest, humiliating, ego-bashing, crushing things that happened. Because here I was thinking, I'm going to be a monk, and I'm going to do this, and I've got all these plans. And then all of a sudden, 3 years on, all your plans have failed. I've got no money, I've rejected all my corporate job offers, and I moved back in my parents 5 years ago with $25,000 worth of debt from studying, which is a lot less than what you have in the US because UK education's cheaper, but still 25K debt, no work experience for 3 years. And also just, it's not even just no work experience, you've literally been in another world, right? You've been in another world. It's not just like, oh, I've been on the same planet. You've been disconnected. I forgot who won the World Cup. Right. I have not read a newspaper. I've kind of kept up to date, but
not much.
And not much, you know? So I moved back in my parents, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? Like, now I'm going to have to think about paying bills, and I'm going to have to think about... My parents aren't well off, so I didn't have anywhere to just... I had their home to hang out in, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'll just live off my parents for a bit, I'll figure it out. I was just like, I literally have nothing. Like, if I don't figure this out, I'll be sleeping in my bedroom that I grew up in for the rest of my life, and that's it. Like, that's life.
Sure.
So it was tough. It was the closest I've ever been to like a very low point, because your biggest dreams have just crushed. And I know no one can really understand my dream of becoming a monk, but you can equate it to, I don't know, playing in sports. Like I know for you it was like that, but whatever it is, music, it was like your biggest dream on the planet just comes crumbling down. And I felt it. It hurt. It really hurt. And it hurt the ego, because all my friends or family who I just about convinced that I was becoming a monk, when I was coming back, they were all like, well, I thought you were going to be a monk. What are you doing? Like, did you fail at that? You know, it was kind of like, you failed at being a monk.
You can't do nothing.
Exactly. You can't even think about nothing. You can't even focus on nothing. So it was like, I was getting a lot of backlash. And I was feeling like the monks, I was like, you start judging yourself and you put that mirror onto others. And I was like, oh, the monks are going to judge me. My friends are going to judge me. Like, I'm going to feel so... And I felt alone. I really felt alone, because I'd let go of a lot to go there. I hadn't talked to my friends for ages. And so anyway, I moved back, and I literally, from the day after I left, I just started reading and learning more about what was happening in the world, started reading about personal development, and started reading about the Vedas again, like my practice. So I never left my practice. I brought it with me. And I had that moment where I had to decide. I was like, wait a minute, I've been taught how to deal with anxiety, pain, pressure, and everything as a monk. And for the first time in my life, I had to put it into like practice, but in like acceleration mode. Like, I had to put everything I'd learned into practice, and everything I'd learned was tested in that moment. And that was hard, because I was just like, wow, I really need to now apply everything I've been talking about, teaching, all this kind of stuff. And I have been tested, but now this is a real test.
Right. Real world.
Yeah, real world. It took me like 9 months to 12 months to feel like I could go into a normal space again, maintain my energy, and still be able to interact without feeling drained, or without feeling like I'm in a lower space, or without feeling like, what's the point of this? You know, all that kind of stuff. Because that's your mentality. You walk back and you're like, what's the point of this all? You know, it's so meaningless.
Yeah.
But then having to realize, actually, it's not meaningless, because I was trained to realize that everything gets meaning when I give it meaning. So if I see it as meaningless, it is. But if I use it as a service, it can be the most powerful thing in the world. And it took me like 9 to 12 months to be able to adapt that mindset. so that I could kind of live with normality again to some degree.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you realize you wanted to start creating videos?
That was much later. So I ended up doing two things when I left. One thing was all my friends who work now at big companies, they were stressed out and hating their lives. And so they started to invite me to speak at their companies like Google and Starbucks, and they worked.
Tell us what you learned from being a monk.
Yeah, that's it. They were all working at these big brands, and they were like, Jay, come teach us what you've learned. Like, we're stressed out. Maybe you learn how to meditate. And I was like, oh yeah. And this is 5 years ago when, 4 to 5 years ago when mindfulness and all this stuff was just on the rise. It wasn't huge yet. Like now everyone talks about it. So I kind of had come back just at that moment. When,
good timing.
Yeah, good timing, but without any strategy whatsoever. And I actually remember, I know you've got Andy Puddicombe on your wall. I remember finding out about Andy Puddicombe when I was still a monk. And I always talk about this.
He was there for 10 years or something, 12 years.
Yeah, he was a monk for 10 years. And I think when he left and started up Headspace, I remember learning about Headspace when I was a monk. I remember hearing about it. And it was very early days then. Like
the monk made it.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah, and now I always look back and go, that was my I wish I could have invested then. You know?
Right.
That's like my thing. Like I had no money to invest. But anyway, it's a brilliant app. But the point being that I kind of came back at that moment in our world where mindfulness, well-being, all these things were coming into the corporate workplace. And so all my friends were inviting me. So I started speaking at all these venues. And I'd been speaking while I was a monk. I've been speaking since I was 16. So that was a very natural part. Teaching was very natural. And I loved it. And people were getting so much out of it. And I was like, wow, like my monk experience is really there to help so many people. And because I'm still living it, I can still give it. And all of a sudden, all of this environment had a meaning and purpose again. And I started to see what my teacher had said, that you're there to share this with people.
Right.
But then I saw this barrier that I was hitting, that most of the companies that wanted it were corporates. And I saw this rise in technology, and I hadn't even joined social media yet. So I avoided Facebook when I was in university because I thought I was going to be a monk, so I tried to avoid it. Then I never used it when I was a monk, so I never used Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, anything until 2014 when I just had a normal friend page where I didn't do anything on it. So I joined social media in 2014, 10 years after Facebook's launched. So I noticed this rise in technology, and I also start thinking I need to understand companies better. So I start reapplying to loads of companies to get my job back, to see if I can learn about technology, because I'm like, I need to get technology. I don't get it enough. So I'm applying to all these companies. I get rejected by the same 30, 40 companies that would have let me walk in 3 years ago. And finally, one company gives me a job. It's called Accenture. And so I get this break at Accenture. And I join it when I'm like 26, 27. And I'm joining with a bunch of new grads who are 21. So I'm like the oldest guy there. And I'm joining and I'm like, I'm just here to learn. Like I keep reminding myself, the intention here is just learn, consume, and you're not going to be here for a long time. So I started learning about social media technology. So happens they were growing digital and social media at the same time. And I just got stuck in self-learning, spent every hour trying to figure it out, had training from their experts. And I ended up becoming the top social media influencer in Accenture, inside 400,000 people. Just through just experimenting, learning, and figuring it out. Because I had a feeling, and it wasn't because I was preparing, I just had a feeling that social media would be useful. That was it. So anyway, then I've been at Accenture for 2013 October to 2015 October. And I'm recognizing that now I'm not playing to my own passion. Everything that I'm teaching about living your passion, your purpose, your living what really matters to you, I'm not doing that myself. Because I'm still talking about digital and technology, when actually what I want to talk about is life and the mind and wisdom. So I quit my job, comfy corporate job, doing really well for myself. And I'm trying to get into media, and so I'm writing to every big media company before my videos and saying, please give me a job. Like, I'll come in at like a video journalist salary. I was looking at salaries that were like a quarter of what I made. I was like, I don't care about the money. I want to make videos and I want to spread a message. I'm getting rejection email after rejection email saying, Jay, you never studied media. Jay, you have no background. So I'm getting rejected by all the biggest companies. Business Insider, HuffPost, The Economist, Wired, you name it. I've got all the emails. And then I try and network with the editors of these magazines. So I find out where they are, I go to the events, I try and talk to them. And they're like to me, hey man, you're like 28 years old. Why do you want to do this? You make more money right now, hang in the corporate world, do it as a hobby. I remember running after one of our biggest news anchors in England called Jon Snow. And he rides a bike around London, but he's huge. He's on Channel 4, one of the biggest broadcasters for us. And so I run after him when he's on his bike, and I'm like, John, please stop. And he stops. He's really kind. I say, John, can you please give me a job? I don't even want to get paid. I'll just watch you. Because he creates these powerful documentaries. He's interviewed the best of the best, like Mandela and all this stuff, life-changing conversations. And he goes to me, he gives me a card and he goes, Jay, go get a master's in media and then come back. And I'm thinking,
I've spent 2-3 more years.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to go back. Anyway, so I came to a point where I literally had no other option than to start a YouTube channel. And my honest limiting belief at the time was that doesn't work for anyone. And that's what I said to myself. I was like, it's not going to work for anyone. But I literally had exhausted. I think it's Thomas Edison who says, when you feel you've exhausted every option, remember you haven't. Mm-hmm. And I'd come to that point where I felt I'd exhausted every option apart from starting a YouTube channel. So I launched the channel Jan 3rd, 2016, 2 years ago. And it's doing pretty well. And so I started to make videos because I felt that was the only way we could scale this message beyond corporates, beyond companies, to people in the world who can't pay for that coaching, who aren't part of this industry. You know, when you grow up in that circumstance, you think everyone has that. But when you look around the world, most people do not work at a huge Fortune 500 company. Yeah. And I wanted to go to them and beyond. And I always had this scale mind in my head. I've always been a big thinker and wanted scale. And when it comes to helping people, there's nothing more important than scale to me. Right. Like being able to impact everyone in the world, right? You can't, if you really want to help, you can't say I'm happy helping 10 people. No. You know, you want to help more people.
That's why video is the most powerful platform to spread a message.
It's incredible.
You know, speaking in front of 100,000 people at an event isn't as powerful.
It's not
big, but it's limited still.
Exactly.
It's a lot of people, but if you want to take it to as many as you can, I think video is the greatest option.
At low cost. To them and yourself, like at completely, like at no expense to anyone. You can change, you can have an impact on someone's life. And I didn't know that then, but I knew that video was the form. So I just tried, and that's when I started making videos, because I felt anyone in the world with a phone, like more people have a phone than a toothbrush, right? So I was like, anyone who has a phone can watch this, and it can impact them and get their journey going, whatever that is. And so that's why I started making videos.
Wow. When did you realize it started to take off?
So it was after a month, I was doing okay. I was getting like 10, 20, 30, 50K views on YouTube, which was pretty decent. And it was just all organic, me pushing it out, sharing my videos, again, tweeting it out to lots of editors and publishers saying, please feature my video. And then coming back even on Twitter and saying, not sure about this message, don't quite connect with it. We don't think it quite works. I got a lot of negative feedback as well. But the audience liked it. I was getting good feedback on YouTube, but from official people, I was getting quite, not negative, but not great feedback. But I kept going. I've always had this mantra that I always believe all you need is one person to say yes. And I still live like that. When I have an idea, I'm just like, I'm gonna knock on every door, and all I need is for one door to stay open. It doesn't matter how many that is. And so I started doing that. And somehow someone showed it to Arianna Huffington. She was at the World Economic Forum and someone showed it to her there. And then I met with one of her team members who's now a really good friend of mine. He was he was the editor-in-chief of the HuffPost at that time. And he loved my videos, he liked me, and then I pestered him for a month after I'd met him to actually get my videos on HuffPost. Then Arianna called me, she said, I love your videos, we want to feature them, just make a series for us and we'll post them up. So I made a series of 4 videos. So this was about 3 months after I started on YouTube. So it's March 2016, March, April 2016. They launched my first video, it gets 1 million in a week views on Facebook on the HuffPost, which was great for them. They're like, let's try the second one. They launched the second one a week after, and that video is now on 40 million views and has another 120 million across Facebook on other channels. But that video did 40 million, it did 1 million in 24 hours, and then like 12 million by the end of the week, and then 24 million in 2 weeks, and then 40 million overall. And then the third video did another 15 million, and the fourth video did another 20 million. And so that was the most views HuffPost has ever had on any of their series in their history. And then Arianna was just like, hey, do you want to come over and be a part of us? So that's when it really took off. When Arianna spotted it, and her team spotted it, Danny Shea, one of my favorite people in the world who really had faith in me and fought my battle when I was just this guy making videos on YouTube, which I still am, but he really saw that it had potential. And Arianna, so them two were like the best. And Arianna's one of her favorite people. They made it happen. He invited me to New York to host a show on HuffPost Live, which was their partnership with Facebook Live. and I had a show called Follow the Reader that I created and produced, where I interviewed self-development experts. So I would have loved to have you on that show, had I still been there. But we interviewed Deepak Chopra, Tim Ferriss, Gabby, Dr. Shefali, Russell Simmons, etc. And
Shefali's great.
yeah, Shefali's awesome. Yeah,
she's really cool.
So I got to meet all these incredible people and more on that show, and that's when it. So that was September 2016. And that's when it really started. That's when I came to New York.
Both of us, probably growing up, had these limits around people who had money and thinking, are they good or bad people? Are they controlling? Are they mean to people? You know, if you have money, can you be a good person or have some spiritualness to you? Or is it only one or the other? You can either be Mother Teresa and serve, you know, you can only be Jesus and wash people's feet and be, you know, humble, or you're this money hungry individual, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that when I was growing up, at least, I grew up in an environment where the people around me believed that if someone was wealthy or someone was rich, that they must have done something dodgy or bad to get there.
Like illegal or sketchy or...
Yeah, it must be sketchy or illegal activities, or they must have stabbed someone in the back, or they must have hurt someone, or they must be taking advantage of someone or manipulating someone.
Using, abusing.
Using and abusing. That's the only way they could have got there.
Really? Yeah.
And generally, the idea that we all know of, that money is the root of all evil, I think that was something that I was exposed to a lot as a child, where a lot of people around me believed that, and we weren't wealthy. So we weren't in a position of financial strength. And often my extended family and others would look to people with wealth. And if we would admire that or see something, they would be quick to like dampen that and be like, no. They just do all this kind of stuff. And so I think there was always that negative view towards people who are rich.
How do we get to a place of, should we admire people that are wealthy? Should we look to that and say, it's really cool what they've built? Should we admire the accomplishment of amassing a ton of wealth? Or or is that not something to admire?
You always ask the best questions, man. This is like,
you know what I mean?
That's such a great question.
Do you admire the results, or do you admire the person they've become on the journey of accomplishing the results and the actions they had in order to get there?
So this is not an interview, Lewis, so I'm going to make you answer that question first. I want to hear your thoughts, because I've got my answer. I know what I want to say.
Well, I think this is interesting, because I was going to ask you about...
It's not an interview.
No, I was going to have a conversation about how you first... Because I remember having this conversation years ago with you, where you never thought that like making money was for you. You were just like struggling in New York City, trying to make it, and kind of live like month by month in a sense. And you told me you kind of had this limit around, can I be spiritual and make a lot of money? Can I serve the world, make wisdom go viral, and also, is it okay to receive money? Is it okay to like charge what I'm worth or charge more for my services? So I remember having this conversation with you, and I was like, I vaguely remember what I said. I said, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself by not generating more to be able to then hire more people to scale this message beyond. So you're not putting all the weight on your shoulders. To be able to invest in more nutrition and food and comfortable sleeping space for yourself, all that stuff, so you can serve at a greater level. And so I think I'm answering the question where I was like, I think if you're doing your life and you're being in service and being the best you can be and as kind as possible to people on that journey, then I think it's both admirable and it's cool to see what you could create financially as well with the impact you're creating in the world. But it's all about how you show up on the day-to-day, how you treat people in the journey of amassing the wealth. I think that's a good But if you've generated a lot of money, but you've been a jerk or you haven't been in service except for to yourself only, then that's not something to admire as a whole man perspective, I think.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
I think that's beautiful. I love that. And I remember that conversation as well. And I want to go back to that question you asked, though, because it's such a powerful question, that should we admire people who are wealthy? And I think we have to be careful about what we admire, because what you admire will be what your actions aspire towards. So,
and you'll start taking on those actions.
Correct. You'll start taking actions and behaviors and decisions towards what you admire. And so I would say that I've always admired people who had a purpose. That's what I admire deeply. When I meet someone, I'd say there's two things that I admire: purpose and humility. Like if I meet someone who has purpose, they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to do whatever it takes, they are mission driven, they want to serve the world. It's why I was always a fan of yours from before we even met and we knew each other, because I was like, oh, here's a person who really wants to do good in the world. Here's a person who really wants to give. And so I think that's the first thing I look for. And then the second thing I deeply admire is someone who has humility, someone who I feel that they were really doing it from the goodness of their heart. So I think for me, my admiration has always been for those two things. And I don't think I can tell someone whether what they admire is right or wrong, but I would say that if you admire something, your actions are going to start dictating your journey in that direction.
Right.
And so you have to be careful what you admire because that's what you're going to chase.
Right.
And so I would say that I like admiring purpose and humility because I think they are worthy of a pursuit.
Sure. Who are some people that we could think about, who have amassed a lot of money, but also we feel like are purpose-driven and in service to whatever their gift is? Who are some people that we can think about?
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about this beforehand, but I'm just curious about who is living that lifestyle right now.
Yeah, that's a tough question. But, and I think, I'd say we know a few people in our own world. I think people that I've always admired and looked up to are anyone from, like, I'd say, that's a hard question. There are people that are coming to my mind right now, but I'd probably say that I think Oprah's work's been phenomenal. Like the conversations she's had that have shifted culture or shifted humanity on her TV show.
Because she's brought in an entertainment, TV show, but brought in the elements of healing, of prayer, of meditation, of spirituality, of, creating consciousness in the planet, which I think is powerful. So she's bringing purpose to entertainment.
Yeah.
And she's built a massive empire financially, been rewarded for that service.
Exactly. And I think that's a great thing. I think that's the reason why I find this question so interesting, because if we're saying that spiritual people can't be rich, that means that spiritual people have to be poor. That means all the people that are rich are not spiritual.
Right.
Is that the world we want to live in?
No.
Do we want to live in a world where the wealthiest people or the most externally, people who have the most resources are people who don't have spiritual intention? I don't know if that's the world I want my kids to grow up in or the world that I want to live in. I would rather grow up in a world where the most influential people had a deep spiritual intention. Yes.
And with that spiritual intention, they were rewarded financially for their level of impact and service. The challenge, the interesting thing is, if you have that much humility and you have that much spiritual intention towards your life and service, does the money matter?
Yeah.
Does it matter as much, like the more you earn? And does it really impact the individual's life if they have $1 million or $100 million? That's the interesting thing also.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing your point, because the perspective you gave to me a few years ago when you brought up that point, like, I remember having like hundreds of millions of views and then being money. 4 months away from being broke.
I remember this, man. It's crazy to me to think that.
Yeah, and it was really true. Like, I would sit in meetings and people would be like, how many views have you had now? And I would share that. And I was getting all this incredible feedback. And then I didn't have any money, and I was literally going to be broke in 4 months. And what I realized was that was negatively impacting the amount of impact I could have sustainably, long term. And it's what you said to me, that what if you're making money, but then you're investing that in your team? What if you're expanding and creating more opportunity? Like today, where we have teams across the world, you have your team here, I have my teams, who are also living their purpose.
Yes.
And we can only employ them because there's growth in this regard. And then they're getting to have a deeper impact. So to me, it depends on what scale of impact you want to have.
Yeah, and I think also spirituality for me is harmony. It's having peace and inner peace. And if you're financially stuck or you're financially struggling or you feel trapped in financial debt and confusion of financial aspect of your life, then I feel like that's holding you back from your spiritual progress.
Yeah.
So it's figuring out how to have harmony and balance in these areas of your life and your relationships and your health and your finances. For me, it's so key, and going deeper spiritually in all of those so they're all abundant.
Yes.
If one is not abundant, then are you maximizing your spiritual capacities of this lifetime?
That's beautiful. That's well put. Yeah.
And so I think it's, and I think so many of us grew up thinking that money was the root of all evil, or people with money were bad, or this and this, or whatever we thought of. But I think it's time to start changing the narrative and saying, okay, I'm going to use money for good. Mm-hmm. And how can I make a commitment to myself to use some of my money to be in service of other people, not just all for myself or needing the flashy cars or things. We both like nice things. You like fashion and experiences. I love travel and adventure and healthy foods and investing in that. You know, we take care of our health. We have trainers, nutritionists, these things. I think it's important so we have more energy and capacity to be of service. So I don't think there's anything wrong personally with making a lot of money or having focus on profit and purpose.
Correct.
But I think you want to have both so you can scale both. There's a lot of people who are so well intended, who have big missions, but don't know how to make money to serve their mission. And they're doing a disservice to their cause because they haven't figured out the skill of copywriting or enrolling people in fundraising or sales or some skill to bring in revenue to support the cause or the mission. And I think that's where a lot of nonprofits struggle with these years, is they're not thinking about all these other things they have to do to serve.
Yeah.
So
and I like that, because I also want to clarify that for someone who is spiritual or is conscious or is awake, whatever word you want to use, or even is focused on personal growth or self-development, their goal is not profit. Their goal is their purpose, their mission, their service. But they recognize that this is something that they have to think about and organize around in order to serve the purpose. So I think it's more about what's your top priority. Like, you don't wake up in the morning every day going, how can I make more money today? Like, that's not the mindset. You wake up in the morning going, how can we serve more people? How can we have a greater impact? How can we help more people?
Yes.
And you realize that creating a profitable business or income is a part of that purpose.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the clarity that we need.
Yeah, our measurement for our company is to serve 100 million lives weekly to help them improve the quality of their life.
Exactly. It's not to make X amount.
It's not to make $100 million a year.
Totally.
But in the, okay, how do we solve this mission equation, which is we want to reach 100 million lives weekly. What does that take? Well, most of it is through video right now. Video, through audio content, through social media, through books, through these different ways to scale a message, right? A different way to scale a message, which takes money, resources, and a team to execute on these different challenges in business to reach that mission. And so it's thinking, okay, we need more people to support on the team. Well, that's going to take more money. So how do we make the money to hire people to serve the mission?
Yeah.
And through the process of figuring out the purpose equation of how to solve that purpose conversation, then you need to figure out money that's tied to it.
Yes. And I also want to make that point that you have to be really vigilant on this path so that you don't buy into your own hype, in the sense of you can convince yourself of anything. And you could convince yourself that you're serving people and you're doing this and doing that, and then you're making loads of money, and then you just convince yourself that it's all okay. And so, yes, you have to be more vigilant on this path. I don't think it's fair to say that, oh, it doesn't matter, it's all good. You've got to check yourself.
What do you mean, vigilant on what?
So you have to remain accountable in some way to make sure that you are continuing to do good with the greater facilities and responsibilities you get.
As opposed to, I just made 5 million this year, 20 million this year, and I'm getting all these accomplishments and awards and recognition. So figuring out how to stay humble and confident.
And purpose-driven.
At the same time.
At the same time, to not get carried away by an opportunity because of that. And so what I'm saying is that I think people often say that, the reason why people think you either have to be spiritual or financially successful is because they think, well, if you're going down the spiritual path, money can be a distraction, or if you're going down money, then spirituality will distract you. And that is true. That is real. Like, you can get really materialistic trying to be spiritual.
Sure.
And you can become distracted from your materialism by being spiritual. That is true. But the goal of life is to live in that paradox, like in that middle point of trying to figure it out. So I often say to people, like, I don't consider that and I know we both feel this way, we haven't figured it out. We don't know everything about everything, but I'm trying to toggle with that because I believe that the truth is in the middle. The truth isn't in the either or.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I want to talk about also how we have individually stayed accountable, humble in our growth and our trajectory individually, because there's at one point where I had no followers and one point you had no followers and we had no business. And now both of us have, an ascension of audience, of opportunities, of money, of accomplishments, awards, things like that. I'll ask you first, and then I'll answer. Stop
asking questions, Lewis. This is not the School of Greatness.
But I'm curious how you have managed the rise to financial gain over the last 5 years and audience gain and recognition gain. How have you, and I'll answer it myself, how have you personally stayed humble in the process of the rise financially?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like, it's that's what I mean by the vigilance, like in the sense of you can't ever be complacent about your inner journey. So if at any point you think you're humble, you're automatically not humble. If you think you're...
So I need to stop saying that to my girlfriend. I'm so humbled now.
Yeah, it's like if you think you're humble, you're not humble. If you think you've been really grounded, you're not grounded, because that automatically cancels out the other. But at the same time, I would say that for me, what are my anchors? And I think I look at them as anchors. So my first anchor is impact is always greater than income. There is always more impact you can make. So I know that for me, what I'm trying to do with the work I'm doing is video was an entryway into a journey of transformation. I wanted people to move from videos, to listen to the podcast, to read the book, to come to events, to come to retreats with me in India. Like I want to help people go as far on their inner journey as they possibly can. That's my personal mission is, if someone just wants to watch a 3-minute video and it makes them feel better, that's beautiful. But if someone one day wants to come with me to India and live the life I lived and have a deep inward journey, then I want to be able to facilitate that. I'm still building that bridge to people's deepest selves.
Yes.
And so the first thing that always humbles me and grounds me is I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
There's so much suffering and pain in the world. There is so much unrest in the world. There is so much trauma in the world. So we've got a long way to go.
Yes.
So all the awards and the views, they give you confidence that you're going in the right direction, but you know you're far away from the destination. So that's one thing. I think the second thing that really helps me is being around, still spending time with my monk teachers who have very different vision as to what is valuable in life.
Yeah, because they don't care about material possessions or money and none of it.
They don't care. And so they're not impressed by that. And so to be around people who don't admire certain things helps you lose taste for it. It's kind of like when I'm around...
You're just a man.
Yeah, like exactly.
Marcus Aurelius.
Go on.
Marcus Aurelius, the story is that Marcus Aurelius would walk through, I guess, the town and just have someone saying, "You're just a man," when everyone was praising his name and kind of bowing to him and saying, "You're like this God," right?
Yeah.
And it's having that accountability that you talked about, people in your life that admire you for who you are, not for what you're creating in the world, right? For just your kindness, your heart, your humanness, not the brand that you have built as an individual. And I think that's so important to have. My girlfriend, Martha, over Christmas,
love Martha.
They did it. She's great. Over Christmas, they have this little game that their family does where you pick out like a word that's going to be your word of intention for the year. And it's supposed to be the word you need. Like everyone picks out a word.
Beautiful. I love that.
And you hang it in an ornament that goes on like a tree and then you look at it again the next year, and then you're always reminded of this word. And there's different words like confidence and self-worth and intention and all these things. And can you guess what my word was? And these are random, right? So you don't know what it is. You pick it out, and it's random.
Okay, let me think. Love?
That's what we've been talking about, which is humility.
Oh, right. No way.
It's humility.
I don't think you told me that.
Yeah, I haven't. So it's humility.
Wow.
So she picked it out, and you read it in front of there's like 20 of her family members.
I had no idea about that.
And I was like, humility. And they're all like, yes, you need that. I was like,
no, you were humble. No,
I know, but I was like,
I can say you're humble.
I was like, I feel like I'm pretty humble, but it's funny when you said that. Like, when you're saying you're humble, you need more of it. And I think the thing is, it's always a great reminder. Whether you're super humble or not, it's a great reminder, because life will bring things to humble you if you do not consistently stay humble in your life.
Yeah.
There's injuries, sickness, attacks online or controversy, whatever might come up in the world, and it's going to continue to come up.
Yeah.
But as long as you have the accountability and the right people in your corner who call you out on your BS and also celebrate you when you're doing good things as well, I think that's important to have.
I agree. I think life is a journey designed to disconnect you from your ego and dissolve your ego. If you think about life as that is the journey. Yes. And so as much as you willingly hand over of that journey, the less it's being pulled away. And what I mean by that is, and it's what you said, when you really think about any success you have or any impact you've made, there is someone who has helped you get there directly or indirectly. So for you to say, I am self-made, it isn't completely true, because there was someone indirectly or directly that helped you get there. So if I say that, people appreciate how I communicate ideas today or certain ideas, I have to thank my monk teachers who taught me that wisdom. Or if someone says, hey, Jay, like you're really resilient, or you've broken through a lot of challenges, but then you have to respect the people that tried to pull you down. And so
that gave you the opportunity to overcome adversity.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so either way, there have been people who have helped you get to where you are. And so you can't claim the ego of, I did this all myself.
And I think there's also something to be said for humility and receiving acknowledgement from others and to yourself.
Yes.
And celebrating what you've also created. I love the acceptance award of Snoop Dogg, where he says something like, and I want to thank me.
Yeah,
I want to thank me for all the late nights, all the early mornings, all the hard work, and I thank me for never giving up on me.
Yeah.
And I think there is this over humility sometimes too, where people are like, well, I'll be like, hey, Jay, it was so amazing what you did. And when people say, it was nothing, it wasn't me, I get to praise everyone else. I think there's a spiritual way to receive accomplishments and be humble in your thank you, graceful in your thank you, receive it as well, because you are showing up in a big way.
100%.
So you can be humble and also gracious in your confidence.
Yes, I think that's a great point, and I completely agree with you. I don't think it's never either or. I think that's the point, that whenever anyone tries to make it, it's like, should you be humble or should you be confident? It's like, be both. Should I be successful or should I be spiritual? It's like, be both. Like, you can be both. Like, and we need to be both, because sometimes you are going to need to. I agree. Like when you reject praise,
what happens?
Or genuine acknowledgement, what ends up happening is you lose the opportunity for someone else to express gratitude.
To give.
You've blocked that ability for them to give.
You're robbing someone's gift.
Yes.
And that's a no-no.
No,
we'll talk about a whole nother session on the law of attraction and hustle.
Yes.
But there's something to be, and people that make money know how to receive, because they receive money. And there's a flow also. There's a flow to it. The ones who are really good don't hoard it, right?
Yeah.
They let it in and they let it out. It's like a cycle. And they're investing it and they're spending on people and they're building things. And they don't say, no, I'm not ready for money. Don't give it to me right now. It's the same thing. Like, you don't want to block someone's acknowledgement or praise or opportunities and say, I'm not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like, take it in, receive it, be graceful, and you can also be humble at the same time.
Yeah, use it as fuel.
Yes.
Don't let it go to your head.
Right.
But you use it as fuel. So if someone gives you praise, you go, oh, thank you so much. That's amazing. Now I'm going to use that to work harder.
Yeah.
Right? But you're not just using it to go, okay, it's gone to my head. Now I'm going to feel that. You're using it as fuel. And I
think that's why everyone needs someone accountable to them.
Yeah.
Whether that's your partner, I know Roddy is that for you probably. Martha is that way for me, where she will celebrate me, but she also just gives me great feedback if she thinks I'm being, over the top on something, which I never try to be, but it's just her being there is a reminder to stay humble.
Yeah.
Even if she doesn't have to say anything, it's just like, okay, I don't need to be boasting anything.
Yeah.
And having someone that you are inspired by in your life that can be that accountability is so key, I think. Having that community of not everyone that just says you're incredible all the time.
Totally.
But someone who keeps you grounded and also supports your growth.
Yeah. I fully agree. And it's for me, the interesting thing, going back to our original question, is
money and spirituality.
Yeah, and going back to in context of this is, if you're proud of something that can be taken away, it will always leave you empty.
So you mean proud of your money?
You're correct. If that's all you're proud of what you've done, and ultimately whether you die with it or you lose it before you die, it is going to go somewhere else.
Right.
It's going to be transferred, even if that's to your children or to anyone else. Then that can be a very scary place to live. It can be a fearful place to live.
So how does someone find purpose in chaos when they can't even get out of the thinking because they're just trying to survive?
Yeah. So, beautiful question. My biggest answer is, first of all, I empathize with anyone who's been in that situation, I can't ever say I've been in that situation in the same way, but I've experienced similar things.
You've seen feeling in your life.
Yeah, in my own way. And I've seen my mum go through stuff like that. I know that my mum worked really hard to raise me and my sister while working, while running around. And I've seen my mum be that incredible powerhouse of a person. And the main thing I would say is, what you can do right now is find meaning in what you do. Make what you do meaningful, passionate, and purposeful. You don't need to suddenly look to become an entrepreneur or start a side hustle or find some more time. Find meaning. And the way you find meaning, as you genuinely stop, press pause for a second, and go, what am I living for? Like, what am I living for right now? And if you're living for your child, and if you're living to provide and put food on the table, that is a beautiful thing that we should celebrate more. Yeah. And sometimes it takes us a moment to stop and celebrate that. And so I would say find meaning, because you can't always find happiness, you can't always find positivity, but you can always find meaning in that position. So I'll give an example. Like, I lost someone really important to me, a mentor, a few days back. I can't be positive about that. You can't be happy about
sad.
It. Yeah,
it's hurtful.
You feel sad, you feel lost, but guess what? I can find meaning in it. Because I can make a list of every lesson he taught me and make a plan to try and live every one of those lessons.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And so if you're in a really tough situation right now, don't look for positivity. Don't look for happiness. Look for meaning.
That's a good one. Not trying to get yourself out of pain too quickly, or discomfort or frustration.
Yeah.
Which I've been the guilt of being like, oh, just be positive. Or whatever to people, but I think it's like, have your experience, live your experience, and find meaning as quickly as possible, and create a commitment to how you want to use that meaning moving forward.
Love that.
I may not be great tomorrow, maybe not next week, next month, but I'm going to use this meaning to serve other people, to continue to do what I love, continue to be great to my friends, my family, in the best way possible.
And when you start doing those small things with love and kindness, so much more opens up. It's like when you can be trusted with the small things and the small moments, you get trusted with more and more and more. And so like, it helps to just, in that moment, and it's in those painful moments that you realize how powerful you are. We all know that. Like, you really recognize it. And what you said was beautiful about not rushing through the pain, because, and this example's probably been shared before, but if you have a wound and you've cut yourself, it's like, you can't rush the healing. You can't rush it. If you broke your arm, and you've been through so many bodily injuries, you can't rush the process.
It's going to take 6 weeks minimum to heal broken bone. Yeah, minimum.
And you've got to sit through that.
It's painful.
There's no injections you can take. There's no videos you can watch. There's nothing you can listen to. But our challenge is we try and rush through the pain
Yeah.
rather than reflect through the pain.
We try to rush the healing process.
Try to
too.
rush the healing, and you can't rush healing. And healing is meant to be slow because it buys you time. It buys you reflection. It gives you so much space
to slow down.
to slow down. And that's what your body's calling out for. And this is our emergency. Like, how many times have you heard it where you slow down, and that's when you fall ill? Because guess what? Your body has been trying to tell you to slow down.
Yeah.
When you feel pain, so I write about it and think like a monk, pain makes you pay attention.
Yeah.
That's what pain's for. Pain's
Notice
not,
this.
Notice this.
Look at me.
Notice me. Look at me. It's like a crying baby craving for attention. When a baby's crying, you don't just go, it's crying. You don't just go, oh yeah, we'll just put it in another room and forget about it, right? Like you go to it and you find its needs. Whereas without pain, when something's painful, we're just like, oh yeah, I'll just forget about it. I'll escape from it. I'll do something else. Yeah. You have to go into that pain.
I'll numb the pain.
I'll numb the pain.
With
That's
alcohol
it.
or whatever.
Yeah. 100%. That's usually our response is, what can I do to numb this?
Work more, have sex more, drink more,
Whatever.
drugs more, whatever it is.
Rather than let me actually become alert. And guess what? The pain just gets higher and higher and higher and higher because unfortunately, until it really hurts, we don't stop.
Or you need more and more to numb it with.
So true.
And so you go to the extremes of life, right?
So true.
Now, what's been the most painful thing you've had to experience since, because I know leaving the monkhood was painful for you, because this was a mission of yours that you wanted to have for your whole life, and I think you were there for 3.5 years. So what's been the most painful thing, I guess, in the last 6 or 7 years since that time that you've had to reflect back on, take notice of, pay attention to, and reevaluate?
That's a great question. I think for me it was in 2016 I moved out to New York. So just let me paint a picture of 2016. I moved 3 jobs. I got married.
Wow.
I moved country. And I just started a whole new life. Like my life just transformed. So we went through all of that with my wife in 1 year. And by the way, all of that was surprises. The job change was surprises.
Yeah.
The country change was a surprise. The marriage was not a surprise. We planned that.
Right.
But apart from everything else, everything was a surprise. Now I said I like surprises, so I can roll with it. But my point is that's a lot of transition in a year.
So much transition.
And I felt the burden of being in a new city where we had no family, we had no friends. And my wife, who loves being around her family, and no one understands just how close she is to them, I felt this burden on me that I had taken away her time with her family, and now she was alone. So I was going out to work, and she'd be crying at home. And I was thinking, she's got no friends, she's got no support. And I know you can relate to this with moving and relationships and so much going on. And so it's like, I'm dealing with that, and guess what? 6 months later, I have to leave and move on and work on a new career to build everything myself. And then I'm 4 months away from being broke. And so on top of all of this, I've now got 4 months away from being broke. I've got enough money saved for 4 months to pay for rent and groceries, and that's it.
In New York City.
In New York City, and that's it. And guess what? Even on top of that, I've got 30 days before my visa runs out and I'm kicked out of the country. So I can't even live here anymore. So not only have I just got married, moved job 3 times, changed career again, had to move into an apartment, 4 months of being broke, and I might get kicked out in 30 days, and my renewal for my visa costs $15,000.
Oh.
So that's gonna eat into those 4 months. I have probably never been under that much emotional, physical, and mental pressure in my life. Like genuinely, I felt it. And I felt my body change. My breath was more stressed. I would be breathing faster, shorter breaths, not deep breaths, heart beating faster, not working out. You get into lazy habits, you start craving junk food.
Sugar to get energy.
I'm living in a 500 square foot apartment with my wife, which is tiny, like everything's in that space. And guess what? We both work from home. So I'm now sitting at a desk, hunched over, trying to figure stuff out. She's trying to cook in the same room. Like I'm trying to, just trying to figure out what to do. And I remember the next morning sending like 100 emails to people and just being like, this is who I am, this is what I can do, how can we serve? And that was the same year that I ended up meeting you later in that year. And the beginning 3 months of that journey were so stressful. Like they were so stressful because I was like, what if I have to move back to London? What am I gonna say to her parents? I mean, I just took their daughter away. Like,
just got married.
I've lived in New York City for 6 months and my life's falling apart. Like, you know, so much. And I've got all these views, but there's nothing happening. And we met.
But you also, I mean, at this time, you're also growing so much. How are you able to create and reach this impact with your videos as that's growing while you're under so much stress and uncertainty.
And I stopped a bit at that time. Like things slowed down hard. Like things slowed down.
I remember that.
I wasn't creating as much as I was because I don't enjoy creating from stress or pressure. And I don't think you can really create something from stress and pressure. So we really slowed down at that time. And when I was creating from a place of recognizing that I could share what I had learned and what I had grown in so far. So anything I was sharing was like, this is what I've learned so far. So that was the biggest pain that I've been through in the last 7 years, for sure. And all I can say is that I remember coming home to my wife knowing that this was going to be the truth. And I came home and I said to her, I guarantee you, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us.
What? The pain?
The pain. I said that to her the night I came home, and she gave out for that. I literally came home, I looked her in the eyes and go, this is the scenario. And I just want you to know that I guarantee to you, this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to us. And I said to her, and this is a monk statement that we used to repeat, I said to her, I'm just not going to judge the moment. Don't judge the moment, because what we do is we try to label moments as good or bad. And when you label a moment as bad, it now does not have the opportunity to become good. I'll give an example. If I go, I don't like this book's bad, right? And I love this book. But if I say that, guess what? I will never pick it up and recognize the value that's inside of it, because you've labeled it.
Yes.
And we label stuff like we label, oh, that restaurant's bad. But when you label a moment,
person's bad,
that person's bad. Now you can't learn from that person. Oh, a great one. That's a really good one. As soon as you start labeling people or anything as good or bad, you limit it. You stop it from being something else. And here's the truth. Every moment can evolve into being anything if you give it the opportunity to.
Right.
But as soon as you say it's got no value anymore, you lose it. And so for me, I had to say to myself, don't judge the moment. And I'd keep repeating that to myself.
Don't judge where you're at.
Don't judge
what's happening.
Yeah, don't judge it as negative. Don't just start saying it's negative. Because guess what? We've all been in positions where a gift turned into a curse and a curse turned into a gift.
That's true.
Right? We've also
where our
been
dreams
in the
came
opposite.
true and it ended up not being what we wanted.
Exactly.
And it fell apart and it led us into our dreams.
Totally. Why is it that so many people that win the lottery go broke?
Yeah.
Gifts can turn into curses too.
True.
But because we label them as the best moment in our life or the worst moment in our life. Whereas when you approach things to neutrality and just what you have on the table, you can be like, okay, what am I going to do next?
That's why the greatest quarterbacks are neutral energy. They'll get a little excited. They'll get a little fist pump in there every now and then, but they're not hyped every play and they're not negative every play. They have this calm. They see the field. You drop a pass and it's like a little bit, let's go. But it's very neutral. Even when you score a touchdown, unless it's maybe the Super Bowl or a big championship at the end of a game, in the middle of the game, you want to keep it pretty like even keel paced so you can prepare for the best or the worst.
That's great. Yeah.
But if you're always up and down, it's like your energy levels will go up and down and you'll be exhausted.
Totally.
You need to have energy in life.
Totally.
And if everything is tied around a story of this is bad, this is wrong, I'm in a bad place, I'm messing up, I'm going broke, that energy is going to pull you away from service.
Exactly.
Or creation or creativity of how do I get out of this place. So I think it's really powerful.
I love that. And I used to have a coach, and I think a lot of coaches use this, or at least he used to say to us, he would be like, if you lose, cry for a day. And if you celebrate, if you win, celebrate for a day.
Yeah, that's it.
And then move on the next day, get back to training. Don't let it run.
Don't live in the past.
Don't live in the past. And what we do is when we lose, we cry for a month. And when we win, we just move on.
Yeah.
Which means that our negative experiences hold us back and weigh us down more than our positive experiences.
So true.
So we're actually allowing, because we don't immerse ourselves in winning and growth, we only submerge ourselves in negative experiences.
Yeah, we need to celebrate also. We try to celebrate. I've been, that's been part of my life as well, is like moving on too quick. And now we try to let's enjoy, let's go to lunch or dinner and really appreciate this moment and celebrate this moment, and even have a dinner with some friends and family.
Totally.
Otherwise, what are we working so hard for?
100%. And we almost feel like we can't do that because that makes us complacent.
Right.
But that's my point.
It's never good enough.
Exactly. But if you win, celebrate for a day. If you lose, cry for a day, move on. Simple.
And you've learned so many lessons over your years. As a monk, you learned a ton of lessons, moving to, getting married, moving into a new country, building companies, launching products and books, and you've had ups and downs. What's been the biggest lesson in the last 12 months for you? Because you've created so much in the last 12 months. You've done so many things. What's been the biggest lesson for you in your life?
Oh, that's a big question. I think I'd have to say that it's and I was saying it to a friend on the phone this morning when I was on the way to you, and I was just sharing it with him because he was having a moment in recognizing this. There's a wonderful verse in the Manusmriti, which I talk about in Think Like a Monk. It's a monk book. And in the verse it says, when you protect your purpose protects you. Now, I want to unpack that. What I mean by that is your purpose is like a rare jewel and a rare gemstone. And imagine you were walking around with the most expensive diamond or jewel in the world. How would you protect it?
You want to just like
wave
it out, yeah.
Yeah, you want to just wear it on your chest.
Like this.
Like a baby.
Holding it.
Yeah.
Putting a pillow around it, a blanket, you'd like, protect it.
You'd protect it. And so your purpose is like that. And guess what? Wow. People are going to tell you every day that that jewel is not worth anything. They're going to tell you that that jewel is actually valueless. It doesn't have any impact on your life. They're going to try and take away that value. They're going to tell you that there's another jewel out there that you need to have more value. And what ends up happening is I love the word, look at the wording, protect your purpose. You have to protect it. So what happens is your success grows, you get more opportunities, more ideas, more things coming your way, temptations, but they can all take you away from your purpose.
Yeah.
Distractions. And to me, I'm repeating this for myself because I'm like, I just want to stick to what I was born to do. And I'm so grateful that I get to do it. I'm so happy I get to do it. And I want to keep protecting it. I don't want to get lost in the waves. You know, you don't want to just get chucked in the waves of the ocean and just get lost and just not know where you're going. So for me, when you protect your purpose protects you.
So that's been your biggest lesson?
That's my biggest lesson.
Why? Do you feel like your purpose has been maybe distracted in some ways?
I don't think it has. But I'm saying it so it doesn't. Like
You're reminding yourself.
Yeah, I'm reminding myself. Like I'm preaching to myself right now. It's
especially
like,
being in Hollywood and the temptation of all these opportunities out here.
Totally, and I think for me it's a bigger lesson also because it gives me more faith. So I always encourage, and this is actually this is why it's my biggest lesson. I encourage so many people that I coach, so many people that I mentor, obviously everyone in my community and audience and everything, to go and follow that, go and live that purpose. And I see time and time again that when I see people trying to live their purpose, they are protected, that things work. When you're playing in your dharma and your purpose, things work, things move, you feel momentum. They happen. And I'm not saying they happen without effort, but they happen, they move. Whereas when you're not, you just constantly feel like you're grinding up against, a wall.
I know, challenges.
Just constant.
So what is your purpose and when did you discover it?
Good question. What is my purpose is simple. It's always has been not since the beginning because I discovered it afterwards. My purpose is making wisdom go viral. And I've stuck with that and I've kept it that way because to me, and there's more to it, making wisdom go viral through entertainment, I would say is my purpose because I believe that is something that is uniquely my goal, impact, and service. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is I'm not limited to a platform. So that can be books, it can be podcasts, it can be TV shows, it can be movies. It's not limited. And this I learned by reading. I was reading after, and this was after my video started to get seen. This wasn't before I did it. It wasn't like I sat down and I wrote this fancy tagline. I was reading Salim Ismail's book called Exponential Organizations. And in this book, he talks about something called an MTP, a massive transformational purpose. And he says that every major person, organization in the world has an MTP. So an MTP has to be aspirational, it has to be massive, and it has to be service and purpose-based. So Google's is organizing the world's information. Notice it doesn't say we're an SEO company. Right. Notice it doesn't say we do Google ads. Right. They're organizing the world's information. Yeah. That's how big they're dreaming. And when you're organizing the world's information, you can do driverless cars, you can do Google Glass, you can sell Google ads, whatever it is. And so TED's is ideas worth spreading. That's what they are. That's what they're about. So Jay Shetty is making wisdom go viral. Yeah. That's what I'm dedicated to.
So when did you discover it? Because it wasn't when you were 10. It wasn't when you were 21 in college.
I'd say I was 30, probably 2-3 years ago. So I'm 32 now. So I'd say like 2-3 years ago is when I discovered it.
So 30 years old is when you discovered your purpose.
Correct.
So what was your purpose before that?
My purpose before that was finding my purpose. Like it's like that process of just like, my purpose before that was 14 years. So I've been online for 4 years. I've spent 10 years offline talking about the same stuff, sharing the same messages in talks, in universities, in small seminars, in coaching, in mentoring. Like I've been doing the same thing for 14 years. but I didn't realize it was my purpose until very recently. But I just did what I enjoyed and naturally try to get better at it.
So if we don't know what our purpose is and we're working towards finding our purpose, it's okay.
That's actually where you're going to spend most of your life.
Discovering what your purpose
Totally,
is.
and that's the best bit.
Because I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what my purpose is.
Totally, there's so much pressure.
How do I find it?
The pressure of finding your purpose
It's crazy.
will stop you from finding your purpose. Literally, the pressure is so heavy. And that's why it's not about finding that. It's just starting with the basics. What am I good at? And I talk about it, and I break down Dharma in here, and I talk about what are your passion, what is your expertise, what is your compassion, because that's really important. What is your compassion for the world? Like, what problem do you want to solve? People will say, there's so many things I could do, there's so many things. I'm like, my question is not what causes you the greatest joy. Sometimes my question is, what causes you the greatest pain?
Make that your purpose.
Make that your purpose. If you don't know what your joy is, you definitely know what your pain is.
What do you not like in the world?
What do you not like? And so for me,
go serve that thing.
100%. So for me, the greatest pain I see in the world is people not reaching their potential. That causes me more pain, because I believe that there is someone out there who is stacking shelves who has the cure to cancer.
Right.
There is someone out there
who's a talented singer.
Is a talented singer. There is someone out there who's not living to their potential, and I think we're better people, we're better partners, and we're better parents when we live to our potential. So that's what I'm trying to solve. And I'm not saying that's the biggest thing,
Sure.
I'm just saying it's my thing.
Whenever I work with people, I'm always telling them to find your purpose, focus on what you're most passionate about or what you have the most pain around.
There you go.
It's the same thing.
There you
so it's
go.
like, do the thing you love the most and keep doing it until you either discover that's it, or maybe I don't love that anymore. Like, I played so many sports growing up. I used to love baseball. I used to love soccer, and then I got bored with it. I got burnt out by it. It wasn't a love of mine anymore. It wasn't a passion. And then I switched to football, and it was like, oh, this is a passion, and I'm actually more gifted physically for this sport than I would be for soccer. I was too big for soccer. I couldn't run 7 miles a day right now on the field. But I think you need to try lots of things, and you might think it's a passion, but you might get burnt out and discover, I don't love it anymore. What else is there? And keep trying new things. Like you said, 8 new things a month.
Yeah.
Till you discover.
Till you discover.
And it might take you until you're 30, 40, 50, right?
It doesn't, and that doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the fun is in the growth and the journey and like, for me, the last 10 years before this happened and my life changed, it was like, those were fun. I was happy.
Right.
I wasn't unhappy because of that, because I didn't
didn't know the exact purpose of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm very clear on it, and I'm happy for it to evolve too. Like, I don't think it has to stay the same. I may sit with you in 2 years' time and tell you something completely different.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. But I can only work with what I have now. And I think we start trying to postpone our purpose or find a date by which you have to. You put a deadline on your purpose. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you really care about it, how can you put a deadline on it?
I know.
You just keep working towards it.
What are 3 skills that everyone should try to learn in the next 1 to 2 years that will help them in their life tremendously? No matter who you are, where you live in the world, 3 things we could start to practice, learn, master that'll improve our life.
Yeah, that's a great question. You asked me a lot of great questions there. So it's like every question.
I know.
That's a great question. You reminded me of something which I'm going to share. Is a bunch of years back, I went to the launch of Eric Schmidt's book, How Google Works.
Nice.
And I was in the audience. I didn't get to interview him or meet him or anything like that, but I remember sitting in the audience, and there was someone else there who was interviewing him and talking, and they were like, and someone asked this question from the audience. So a student got up and they said, what do you think is the #1 skill that students should be focusing on? And they said, everyone should become data analysts. They were like, everyone in this room should become, and I was sitting there going, I know nothing about being a data analyst. And I think sometimes we throw out these careers or like hard skills and technicals, and it's like, well, not everyone's gonna vibe with that. So I just wanted to share that because I think so often like we get bad advice like that. And I'm like, imagine I pursued becoming a data analyst.
I know, and you have to also know the perspective of the person you're getting that advice from. So your perspective, your 3 things that people should be taking on is going to come from your world perspective and your experience of what's worked for you.
Correct.
But what would you think?
Yeah. So I'd say the first one for me is learn how to have a conversation with yourself.
Ooh.
Like, just learn how to have a conversation with yourself. Like, if you don't know, I'll give it one of the studies that I share in the book, which I absolutely love. Men and women were asked either to be alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes, or they could give themselves an electric shock if they were bored.
And they took the shock.
30% of women chose an electric shock, and 60% of men chose an electric shock because they didn't want to be alone with their thoughts.
For 15 minutes.
For 15 minutes. Why is that? Because we have not learned to have a conversation with ourselves.
Or even love ourselves.
No, we haven't. And I think that starts with a conversation.
Yeah.
I think you're right. We don't love ourselves, but that starts with learning to talk to yourself. So find time for you to talk to your own mind, to talk to yourself, to understand yourself, to find out. How many of us, when you go to a restaurant, you know whether you're going to go back or not, based on whether you like the food. When you watch a movie, you know whether you're going to recommend it to your friends based on whether you liked it or not. Why do we keep visiting the same people, the same places, and doing the same projects when they don't lift us up? So many of us are not aware of the same people that we hang around with that bring us down, the places that don't feed us, they drain our energy, and the projects that don't light us up.
Yeah.
But we keep going back there because we don't talk to ourselves. Because we don't talk to ourselves, because no one, like I can ask you, hey, did you like that restaurant? But when do we ask ourselves, hey, do I want to hang out with that person? Does that person
Do I want to be in this relationship?
Do I want to be in this
Do I want to be in
relationship?
this job?
We
Do I
get
want this-
scared of those conversations. So we avoid them. So that's first tip. The second thing
Learn to
I'd-
have a conversation with yourself.
Learn to have a conversation with it. The second thing is know how your mind tricks you. So we used to play this game in the monastery where every time you lose to your mind, you put a scoreboard up and you put a 1 for the mind and 0 for you.
When you lose to the mind, meaning what?
Like, so let's say you make a commitment. So I make a commitment that I'm not going to eat sugar.
And then you
in
do.
2020,
the
and
mind,
I do.
The mind beats you.
The mind beats me to it. So I'm going to put a 1 for the mind and a 0 for me.
It's
right?
great.
It's great. It's competing with yourself
fun.
in a good way. It's fun, yeah. And people do this with like, I guess now with like dollar jars or whatever. Like
Yeah,
you put a
or if
dollar
I
in, you
swear
say,
or
and you
something,
swear.
yeah.
But that doesn't make sense because you end up making money every time you swear. So it doesn't. So, but if you beat your mind and you put it, it's great.
Yes.
So you have to start learning the tricks of your mind. When and how does your mind fool you into making bad decisions?
That's good.
If you know that,
Where did it fool you the most that it was the hardest for you to overcome?
yeah, I think the biggest thing is probably ego. Like it's wanting to, it's like walking into a room expecting respect, walking into a room expecting to be dealt in a certain way.
Wow.
Like when
To
you
be treated with
treated with you
royalty.
buy your own hype, right?
Oh,
you
wow.
fall for the stuff like
Do you
that.
still fall for this sometimes?
I think we all do. Yeah, I think I would be in ego if I didn't say I did. Like as in like ego. That's the trick of the ego. The ego makes you think you're untouchable, and the ego makes you think that you are, that nothing about you can ever go wrong, or you're perfect, or not even that, but the ego.
Nothing can bring you down.
Nothing
can hurt you.
Correct.
Nothing can...
When the moment you think you can't be brought down, you will be brought down.
Right.
The moment you think that you can't, like one of my teachers would always pray that he never, and he's been a monk for 40 years, he would always pray that he would never fall to his temptations. And we said to him, you haven't fallen to your temptations for 40 years. Why do you pray for that? He goes, I haven't fallen because I pray for it.
Wow.
Like he was like, because I pray for it, because I'm aware.
Not just because I think it's going to, yeah.
He's aware. And there's a beautiful story of Benjamin Franklin, where he talks about before he died, I believe he had 13 or 14 precepts. These were qualities that he wanted to live by and gain. So they were like simplicity, integrity, virtues, all these powerful things. And he was asked when he was on his deathbed, which was the one he didn't accomplish. And he said the last one, that was humility. And that's like the display of humility. Like you can't think you're at humility and then be humble. Like that's not possible. It's an oxymoron.
How do we stay humble with greatness happening?
Yeah.
If you're achieving your dreams, you're making an impact, you're doing great stuff, how do you stay humble?
I think the biggest one is surround yourself with people who are constantly better than you. And when I say better, I don't just mean materially. I mean, when I'm around my monk teachers, I just feel filthy.
Right.
Like they're
I'm a
so
dirty
pure.
human being.
Yeah, they're so pure that it's such a mirror reflection. I'm around them and I'm like, whoa, I've got so much.
I'm a slob.
I've got so much like duh.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Like I love being around them. And they don't say that to me. Like they don't make me feel that way. It's just that you get a mirror. When you're around people who are transparent, you get a reflection of yourself.
Wow.
Like, so I get that when I'm with them. So first thing is spend time with people who are more spiritually elevated and more conscious, because you get a reflection without them even saying it.
Yeah.
The second thing is keep increasing your goalposts. Like most of us are not, our goals should keep us humble, not other people's goals. We try and think other people's goals keep us humble because we're looking at what people are doing. It's like your goalposts
should never be achieving, or it should be bigger and bigger all the time.
Bigger and bigger all the time. Always thank the people who gave you the gift that is being recognized. Like if you're being recognized for a gift, someone gave that to you somewhere. Thank your mentor. Thank your teachers. Yeah. Give it back to them, because I think we forget that. Like you start thinking you're self-made, and I don't think anyone's genuinely self-made. I just don't think that's true, because someone had to give you an interruption, an interaction, an exchange, a skill, a gift, an idea, whatever it was. These are really fun questions.
The first one is to have a conversation with yourself.
Learn how to have a conversation. Second is know how your mind tricks you and be fully aware of it.
And was humility a part of that, or no? That just
I would say that was just my personal example of what I think I can struggle with sometimes.
Okay, and the third skill that everyone should learn.
The third skill everyone should learn is how to have difficult conversations with other people.
So hard.
Because I think that marriages are made of it, dating's made of it, friendships are made of it. I think sometimes we've had some difficult conversations, like in the sense of I had to call you up and say something, and it's like, I think we're good at that with each other, and that's why our friendship is strong, because I think we're honest with each other, and I feel that you feel comfortable telling me stuff. Like we've had email exchanges where you've been honest with me and I've been honest with you, and I'm like, I think that's good. Because I think when you don't have tough conversations with people, your relationships just sit on the surface, or they never go anywhere.
It's the strong emotion that begins to select and instruct the gene that creates disease. Why? Because if the environment signals the gene, and that's the truth, that's epigenetics, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, the emotion that you feel from that event is literally selecting the gene.